review, roles and responsibility and relationships. And that's it, Your Worship.
That's it, okay. So if I could ask for a motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
So moved, Your Worship.
Second, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And moving straight down into motion to adopt the minutes. Moved. Second, all those in favor? Opposed? And straight into presentations, Ms. Kathy Cook, Executive Director, BC Municipal Safety Association, to present Council with the City of Excellence Innovation in Safety Award. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've been here before.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, I've been here so many times I've lost count of how many times I've been here, presenting safety awards to the City of Nanaimo. And I'm very pleased tonight to be able to present the City of Excellence Innovation Award. The City of Excellence Award was created to reward and recognize municipalities that have excellent underground disturbance practices. And the City of Nanaimo has won the City of Excellence Award, and then they've got an honorable mention. This year, you are getting a special innovation award. The innovation award this year is, you probably all remember a case last year where there was an underground mine underneath one of the streets. That took a lot of extra work on behalf of City of Nanaimo staff to make sure that staff and public were protected throughout that process. And I can tell you in the submission that came to us, it's nothing short of amazing, the steps that were put into place. So as a result of that, the City of Nanaimo is receiving the Innovation Award. Your Worship, if you would come accept
Surely.
it.
Thank you.
And we have Rick doing the picture. You see him sitting? Yes, there he is.
So we've got the right side.
You have the right side up. Congratulations. Push the button, Rick.
Thank you very much. Thanks, you know, and I just want to thank you for this occasion. And I will never complain with you.
Exactly. Congratulations. Thanks.
Well, that is a very prestigious award, and thank you very much for that. We move right down into corporate services. 8A, development permit DP 869 at 2589 Kenworth Road. Purpose to seek council authorization to issue a development permit for a 3-story light industrial facility which includes accessory office space with 4 proposed variances.
So move staff's recommendation that council issue development permit number DP 869 at 2589 Kenworth Road, including the following variances: reduce the watercourse leaf strip to 5.5 meters, reduce the required front yard setback to 0 meters, increase the maximum allowable building height to 18.44 meters, and reduce the required number of loading spaces to 2.
Second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Discussion, Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. I would like somebody on staff to explain this. I think it's called qualitative connection between giving this riparian setback variance and some other green stuff on this property. I think it's important that it gets explained to everybody present here and who might be listening, particularly because we only recently adopted the new riparian standards. And so can somebody talk about that?
Mr. Lindsay, are you going to go ahead?
Thank you, Your Worship. Certainly, as Councillor Patchy has just mentioned, the riparian area regulations were recently adopted just last week by Council. This application, of course, has been in stream for a number of months prior to that, but certainly has been viewed and vetted under those guidelines, understanding that they were coming forward. So it very much proceeded on a path of no net loss, and a path of making sure that at the end of the day that it was improvement to the habitat along the lake. So you'll see in there in your report that there is an impact executive summary that was completed by the what they call the QEEP, or the Qualified Environmental Professional, who believes at the end of the day that this is an actual improvement to the site. There's quite a few invasive species, Himalayan blackberry, broom that's on the site now. The end result will be an intensive replanting of those areas. So from that perspective, it's an improved quality. There's also compensation for the area. There's approximately 480 square meters of the riparian area that's proposed as part of the variance that the building will be projecting into. And as a result, there's about a 900 square meter green roof that's being proposed on top of the building. So there's the compensation there in terms of that idea of no net loss of actual habitat, riparian habitat.
Just one follow-up. Mr. Lindsay, could you also talk a bit about, there's mentioning here of a future public boardwalk, and then in Zone 2, we talk about a 2.5 meter terrestrial public walkway. How does it all fit together?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just trying to find the site plan to refer it. Plan attached in your report on page 26 is probably the best to speak to. The idea at this point would to proceed as part of this development with the trailway, which would allow for a connection to the road, to Kenworth Road, allow people to pass in front of the development site, with a long-term potential of looking at a boardwalk that it would extend out around the end of Kenworth. But at this point, the application is specifically for that, for the walkway portion.
And one final follow-up. It was brought to my attention that one of the things that had to happen with this application was the widening of Kenworth from whatever it was to 20 meters, and then it was settled on 10. What's the rationale for changing your mind on the actual width?
Thank you, Worship. To start with,
And particularly because it's a dead-end road.
That's correct. So there's a very narrow road right-of-way that existed on Kenworth previously. The idea, and I assume that came at a time when it was decided that it was the end of the road and that we did not require the ultimate standards. At the time that this application came forward, it was clear that there need to be some improvements to Kenworth Road. So we have a modified cross-section. We do not have the full cross-section because, again, it doesn't obviously extend through. There's no need for through traffic, but there is the need to accommodate pedestrian movements. There's the need to accommodate on-street parking. That's been allowed for here in this modified road cross-section.
Thank you.
Councillor Kip.
Thank you. I like the idea of the building, the concept of it. The time frame's been a long time. I've talked to the proponent of the businesses. It's taken quite a bit of time. I hope through our DPRC we can improve some of those. I've understood they've been asked for a global impact on what that building will do to the Diver Lake habitat. And the other one for me, the one that, with the frog access to the roof, I guess I'm going to say, where in our council policies have we asked for those type of riparian protections and green roof? I guess for me, if I was a bird, I'd love having frogs on the roof and pick them off one at a time. That'd be a great little feeding spot up there. And then to have the connection down to grade seems a bit much for me. And I consider myself fairly green. So can staff explain that? Where did these rules come from?
Mr. Swaby, did you want to comment on that?
Your Worship, I'll certainly start, and Mr. Lindsay can join in. But certainly, we've become more environmentally responsible as we move forward. That's one of Council's priorities, and I have no doubt that over time we're going to start regulating things that we've never regulated before. We only regulated fish habitat 10 years ago, and now we're doing wildlife corridors. We're doing beaver protection. We're doing nesting birds. Species that are at risk. So this is all a progression of when Council sets this as a priority. This is how we move, and this is probably one of the areas we're not that familiar with in terms of green roofs that we're looking at ways to make sure that they do the job that they're supposed to do. So, Mr. Lindsay.
The only thing I would add, Your Worship, is that the green roof that's proposed as part of this project, although it will allow for stormwater detention as part of the system of preserving the pre-development flows, there's no plan to introduce amphibians and on the roof. It would be primarily habitat for insects and birds that would normally be found in that riparian area.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I would like to expand on the questions of Councillor Kipp. I'm having trouble understanding. It's my understanding that during the application process, the applicant was asked, or it was demanded of the applicant, that they must provide a study relative to this building's effect on global warming. At what point did Council give instruction that that's what we were going to be requiring of applicants on new buildings? That's my first question.
Mr. Lindsay, are you going to...
Sorry, Your Worship, I'd have to report back to Council. I'm not aware of that request being made as part of this application.
Okay, number 2. On page 14, it talks about however, the owner, when it talks about the existing trees that were on the property, however, the owner removed the trees without prior authorization for the city urban arborist and necessary tree removal, and we hence charged them with 19 counts of removing trees and 1 count of disturbing the setback area, which was blackberries, which is part of a management program and a landscaping plan that's going to be taken out anyway. Not long ago, we had an application in front of us where we learned, it was a development permit application on Bowen Road, where the development permit hadn't even been approved yet a foundation permit had been granted to the applicant. So here we are, somebody else who's on the footprint of the building, removed some trees, and disturbed some black bushes on an area that's part of a management program, and we're fining them $20,000. I'm having trouble understanding this. Can somebody explain that?
Your Worship, certainly this is, again, we learned from council, and we've had recent examples where developers have taken trees down in the riparian area without permits, and council has been very adamant to staff that you want the full weight of the enforcement bylaw to be taken into account. So this is the movement towards environmental stewardship that council is the path that we're on. The example on Bowen Road is clearly different. There's no environmental areas, and it was an example where staff were trying to be more business friendly and allow the applicant to keep the project moving, because we had some delays that we felt we were part of, and we issued the building permit. It could have been changed if council didn't approve the development permit, but in this case, this is dealing with trees where we believe council has been very adamant about protecting the environment.
But we've got but with all due respect, we had a process in place where we're going to disturb it because we're going to build a building there. We're not talking about encroaching into an area that we're not going to disturb. Part of the management program behind that building was that we were going to revegetate and remove the invasive species. So when the landowner disturbed that area and removed some of the invasive species, we fined them.
Your Worship, I'm not being argumentative. We would love you to provide staff all the flexibility and not have to worry about whether council needs to know whether we're authorizing trees to be removed. But lately, council has been very interested in knowing and approving the development permits before you have trees removed in the riparian area. And in this case, they took them down without the development permit. I grant it that some of the trees would have had to come down anyway if you approved the development permit, but without direction from you to give me that authority, we're going to, and with your recent direction that you're very interested in preserving these trees, we're not going to take different action than we've taken on this.
So, Your Worship, then, if that's the case, and I thank you for that, Mr. City Manager, then I would suggest that I would like to put forward a friendly amendment to the recommendations or the motion that's on the floor, that as we have this application in front of us for approval, that we thank staff for taking the diligent action, however, that we refund the fine money, or refund or make the fine zero on the disturbances.
Yep, go ahead.
I would heard the staff say that it was in the riparian area, and I understand the trees were not in the riparian area. Is it? Because it says on page 14, the triangle area filled in about the second paragraph up from the bottom. The City Environment Section proceeded with enforcement action and issued 20 tickets for unauthorized removal of the 19 trees and the unauthorized encroachment of the 15-meter leaf strip. Were the trees removed in the leaf strip, or was 1 or 2 trees removed in the leaf strip? And were they in the building area? Because what I would then suggest, if it wasn't in the leaf strip, that I would amend your motion to say to reassess the trees that were fined and recalculate to those that were in the riparian area. That would be mine, if in fact if in fact it's not in the riparian area?
Your worship, I'll turn it over to our environmental planner, but I'll also remind council that there was an application in the Departure Bay area that didn't involve a leaf strip, that they took the trees down without a permit, that council was very interested in making sure that the fines were levied. So to be consistent, this is what staff is doing. If we were to waive the fees now, then I would suggest we should pay back or waive the fees for the
A
others.
reassessment is what I said. And I think we run sometimes inconsistent, but that's okay.
And Mr. Lawrence?
Well, before we start, if I may, Mr. Lawrence, Mr. Swaby, what I was going to suggest, are these not two separate issues? I mean, I'm wondering whether we should not try to deal with the motion that's on the floor now, and then the matter of what may or may not have happened on that site that may involve penalties. Should that not be discussed as a separate item?
Your worship, absolutely. This is why staff has brought the development permit forward. It's perfectly within council's purview to continue to issue the development permit. The issue of fines is a separate issue that we are pursuing with the owners.
It's in the report.
Okay, Councillor McKay, you're done. So, Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. On March 27th, 2014, the Design Advisory Panel accepted and approved DP 000869 with 3 recommendations: a bike rack, improving the main entrance stairwell, consider increasing the density of landscape. Prior to that, the property owner agreed to give up 36 feet of road frontage of property that they own and to widen the road to a dead end, which they are the last property on the dead end. This is the second time that we've had a applicant before us that has removed trees prior to receiving a DP, none of which in this particular case, or maybe 1 or 2, I'm not sure, I don't have that specific detail, in an environmentally sensitive area. But on both occasions, the developers have indicated that they've been given verbal permission, but don't have a written permit in which to act upon. So I think that hopefully we can clean up some of our communications so that we don't find ourselves in this situation and having to adjudicate this up here. I get that we want to protect trees. I get that we want to do all that, and we should. In less than a couple of months, the property where those trees were, that were the size of a stop sign in width or girth or whatever you want to call it, they're coming down anyway. So it seems a little bit, to me, a little bit perhaps heavy-handed. If somebody was parked on this downtown and their meter just expired and somebody walked by it, like a bylaw enforcement officer, and some elderly person was getting in it, I would sure hope that they would use their better discretion. So that certainly concerns me, especially since the DAP panel approved this back in March 27th, and we're still waiting here June the 9th to approve this. I'll be supporting it.
Okay, Councillor Kipp, did you have anything further to add?
Nope.
No, Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to remark that this probably is one of the first that we've had in front of us that uses the no net loss principle. And I'm really happy to see that. And it seems to me that the green roof is a part of the no net loss principle. And that is if there is development around the riparian area, that we put into place assurances that there won't be any net loss of that riparian value. And I really like this. I think it's a really good way to go. And I just want to give my compliments to staff and to the developer for coming to an agreement that respects the green principles that we've been working so hard on this term. Thank you.
Okay, we have Councillor Johnson next, but before you do, I'm just going to say I would like to say I also will be supporting it. I think this is actually a very, very important project for Nanaimo, and I think let's remember that we're trying to bring high-tech industries into Nanaimo, and I understand we've got several of the high-tech industries now that will be potentially located at that site, and there's others as well that have indicated an interest. So I certainly will be supporting the motion on the floor. Councillor Johnstone.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I will also be supporting it and look forward to the finished design. There was no seconder for the amendment, so I guess that amendment is not on the floor.
I'd like a seconder.
No, okay. And I would not like to see that happen.
Second that.
Okay, well, then we go back to the motion. It has to be made again.
I'm sorry, Your Worship. I didn't hear an amendment. All I heard was a friendly amendment, which was not authorized by the mover or the seconder.
Which was not.
Which is not, yeah. So far, all we have in the floor is the motion as is read on the agenda.
Thank you.
Worship, I thought we were going to go to a separate motion
Well, but the thing is...
for the reassessment.
Well, maybe that's something we can certainly do as a recommendation to staff, but maybe I could ask, maybe Mr. Lawrence, you could answer, is there now a procedure before staff of how to address the issue that Councillor McKay is referring to? And that's to do with the possible involvement of the riparian area of the property?
We actually are working on staff protocols right now, so how to do this in a way that's effective and efficient, and looking at the enforcement issues, but also looking at how the riparian variance process is going to occur. So that's underway right now.
Mr. Swaby, to you, are you then suggesting that we should have a follow-up motion on this one? Because we're dealing with the motion that's on the floor, and now there's a suggestion about a follow-up motion, which I think will deal, Councillor McKay, with the concerns that have been expressed earlier?
Well, Your Worship, it's up to council on what you would like to do with the
If
funds.
they want to do that. So, okay. So, Councillor Johnstone and then Councillor Brennan.
Well,
Do you want to add something?
no,
Okay,
if we're going to
Councillor
go ahead
Brennan?
proceed with the question.
No, if we're just going with this motion, I don't need to speak.
All right. So we'll take you down. So the motion is before you now. It's a staff recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now, would you like to make the second motion?
Certainly, Your Worship.
Please, step right in here.
That we move that the fines for the removal of the trees on the building area and the disturbance of the invasive species in the setback area be reassessed to a $0 amount.
Could I make a friendly amendment? To be reassessed and give staff the ability to look at the area, the planning area, and reassess what has been disturbed, considering there's been a long process.
Would you like to, are you going to second that
Well, I'd
motion?
second the motion.
And then
if
add
it's
as a
without
friendly...
to zero.
Certainly.
So,
Okay, if
understandable
I
to
can...
staff, that we have staff reassess the areas of, I'm going to say, intrusion, and reassess the number of trees to see what was affected in the riparian area, and reassess. Could come back exactly the
Basically,
same.
if I may, I would like to see this referred back to staff to give us a report on what has happened and their recommendations regarding the penalties that have been assessed. I don't know that that's something we can deal with tonight, but Mr. Swaby, what's your position?
Your Worship, if you want to make a referral motion, that's up to you as well.
Well, I don't know that it's a referral. That's the point. And maybe...
The motion on the floor is to actually waive the penalties, is my understanding.
Okay, we've got a couple more speakers first. Councillor Patchy. Sorry? Councillor Patchy. You won't come back.
Just to staff as well, I heard Councillor McKay mentioning the amount of the fine as being $20,000, and I heard from the applicant that it was half of that, $10,000, which is the correct one.
Mr. Lawrence?
It's
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Johnson, are you on again?
Yeah, thank you.
okay, go
Thank
ahead.
you, Your Worship. I won't be supporting the motion on the floor. I believe staff acted in council's direction previous and when we passed the riparian plan, and I think it's setting precedence, and I don't believe we should remove the fine. I think they acted on our behalf.
Okay, Councillor Kip.
Thank you. Well, I have a different consideration on that. I talked to the proponent, and they said they've talked to one department in the city, went through the development review and everything, and were told, oh yeah, go ahead, clear your property, and then came back to the bylaw department and enforcement. So, and this is typical to the one we heard before at, by the town center there. They heard the same thing, that they had the go-ahead, but it wasn't written. So I guess the idea for me on this is I don't think there's an appeal process, is there, for these fines, or is there an appeal process?
Your worship, you're witnessing it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So we are the appeal process. And I'm asking that with your motion, I'm asking that we have staff review this, give us a report, show us where the trees were removed if they have it mapped out or pictured, and let's know what type of process we've started here and what the appeal process would be for someone. So that's my reason for this motion. I bet you it's real clear to staff.
Well, you know...
they can interpret me.
Mr. Swaby, you had a comment?
Not to put words in Councillor Kipp's mouth, you're referring it back to staff for a report on this and what the process is for appeals and how this affects the enforcement of the bylaw.
Yes.
Well, that's...
Does that meet yours?
Oh, it does meet? Okay, because I can certainly support that. I mean, I would really like more information from staff, and I'm not comfortable making a knee-jerk decision and saying yes or no. I would like some more information from staff on how this got to the position it is, and find out if there is a remedy on it too. Councillor Greaves.
Thank you, Worship. Well, I have real problems with. I've actually learned lately that we shouldn't be making motions on the fly. It just comes right out of the blue. I have no idea. I'm reading the agenda. I do my homework, and now it's a whole different matter. You know, I have been staff, and I'm telling you, if council started to second guess me as staff, my morale and the morale of all the staff that I, in fact, worked with would go right down the tubes. Staff is very well aware of council's position on this stuff, riparian rights and all that stuff, and trees, and I don't see any developer in front of us asking for this. I don't know where this came from. I'm really, this is out of the blue. I think we should just carry on with the agenda, and I don't see any reason for this whatsoever. I'm sure staff has done what they're supposed to do. Let's get on with it. I'm totally not in favor of this motion. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Kipp.
I just want to make a clarification that this RAR application is new. It's new to staff. It's new to us. This is where we bring our information forward. We have found out and discovered something, and we're trying to bring it forward so that we can educate people that don't know or give you some insight into what we hear from the public. I think part of my job description, unless it's changed tonight later, is to take the public's information back to the table. I'm bringing information that I heard back to the table about frogs on the roof, about all of this. So if you don't have that, I'm offering it to you now. And we've had many, many things come to the table because they're important, and this is a debate that we're going to have now. We've had a couple removals in the last month that have caused us trouble. Lots of staff time, investigation time, innuendo. So this is about getting to the point. So if you don't like it coming to the table late, don't vote for it.
Could I just ask staff if you would read the motion now on the floor so we can have an understanding where we're at?
Yes, Your Worship. My understanding of the motion is that the staff provide a report regarding the fines levied for the removal of trees and disturbances of the invasive species and advice of a process for appeals and how this affects the enforcement of the bylaws.
Does that capture the motion and the seconder? Okay. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Richard. I'm ready to vote. But, on the DPRC, we talk about the environmentally sensitive areas and the riparian setbacks and all that stuff. And I mean, it's really, really important. And I'm delighted that we've taken those steps with the environmental group or committee as well. And so it is a really important topic. But when I think of the type, so if it's a Gary Oak or a Douglas fir or a dogwood or something, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty obvious. And then when I think of the location, then that's when if it's not in an environmentally sensitive area and it wasn't one of the aforementioned trees, and we know that when this permit goes through that they're coming down anyways, it starts to make it not make common sense. And so the location, the type, and the size, I hope is what when we're going out to look at sites and properties that we're taking into consideration. And then, of course, communicating that by tagging them or something, not to remove these under any circumstances before all the necessary permits are in place. And because we're all anxious to get started, and we're all anxious to be business friendly, and we're all anxious to ensure that our development community has the opportunity to develop responsibly. And I think that's why we're having this conversation here tonight. So I'm glad we're having it. I think it's important, and I think it's important that our community sees us having this conversation. Thank you.
Councillor Brennan, we'll give you the last word.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is not an appeal process. All appeal processes are brought forward by an appellant, by somebody who feels aggrieved by a decision. There's no developer here telling us that they think this has been unfair, that it's been improperly assessed, that these are the facts of the case on the developers, from the developer's perspective. All that we're hearing here is some hearsay. Somebody told me. Well, no one told me, and it is unfair for this body to adjudicate something like this without having the facts in front of them. And we don't. We simply don't have the facts in this particular case. If I were the developer and I were particularly upset about this, I would come to that podium and I would address council and I would tell them, no, they're not afraid to. I see them here week after week after week, people coming up, people who are just mom and pop developers developing their own house. They're not afraid to stand at that podium. And I've seen developers stand at that podium too, and I've seen them in committees. They're not a timid bunch. Now, if we are going to proceed on these kinds of things on the basis of hearsay, on the basis of someone who has the ear of a council member, then we're making a mockery of this podium, of this ability to come and state your case to council. If we want to do a review, let's do a review of the general way that we assess damage and the fines arising out of it. But for us to say, some developer told me this story, I don't have the information. I want the information from the developer. I think that we would be set a very strange precedent to suddenly start calling this, what's going on here, an appeal process. This is not an appeal process.
Okay. Does everyone understand the motion on the floor now? And are we not prepared to vote at this point? Is anyone here that hasn't made up their mind on it? So I'd like to call the question on it, and if anyone wants the motion read again, if not, we'll call for the question on it. All those in favour? Opposed? Councillor Johnson, Councillor Brennan, and Councillor Greaves opposed. Balance of council in favour. The motion passes. We'll move into C, determination of acceptance of parkland dedication or cash in lieu of parkland dedications through the subdivision of the plan. Purpose to Oh, I'm sorry. B, I beg your pardon. Thank you very much, Councillor Patchy. Liquor license application LA 107, application for an entertainment endorsement for a food primary liquor license, New York style pizza and pasta at 299 Wallace Street. Purpose to advise council of an application from New York style pizza and pasta to permit patron participation entertainment within the existing licensed restaurant in advance of staff requesting comments from adjacent property owners and occupants. As council is aware, a municipal resolution is required before the province will consider the application.
Star
Staff's
Chamber.
recommendation to receive for information and report pertaining to liquor license of application LA 107 at 299 Wallace Street.
Second. Moved and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now I move on to C, determination of acceptance of parkland dedication or cash in lieu of parkland dedication through the subdivision plan. Purpose to delegate the authority to the approving officer to decrease the processing time for preliminary layout approval, PLA acceptance for subdivisions, and the staff recommendation is before you. If somebody would like to move that. Moved. Seconder?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Councillor Bessick, did you?
Thank you, Worship. It's my understanding that this will be a time saver. Is it, Mr. Lindsay, or to staff, could you please tell me how much time this is literally going to save in the scheme of things?
Your Worship, our estimate would be about 2 to 3 weeks on each PLA.
It's big.
Yeah, thank you. And with respect to the approving officer, reasonable to assume then that all of the respective departments, the PR&E and so on and so forth, will all be involved in that decision-making process?
Absolutely, Your Worship. The Parks Department works very closely with the approving officer when consideration is given for park dedication. The Parks Master Plan is the guiding document for helping us to make those determinations, yes.
Thank you.
Great. Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, I'm interested in this. I certainly don't have any major objections to it, but we've been doing it where council has been asked to make this decision, whether, in our judgment, we think that, you should pay cash or you should have a little park. And so I'm wondering what's changed, or can you say what was the reasoning in the past about why this would have been something that staff thought council should adjudicate?
I'm sorry, Your Worship, I can't give you a history. It's been in the current format for many, many years. My understanding is that there was likely a resolution at one time to give the approving officer the authority to make the determination when the city was taking park. So that's been in place. Every application that comes forward that we take parkland on, that decision is made by the approving officer. From staff's perspective, it was somewhat odd that the approving officer was making that decision. However, if the determination was made that cash in lieu was the preference, then it required to come to council. So our recommendation is to have both processes delegated officially by the bylaw to the approving officer.
So you don't think that the public is losing any piece of their input or the value of the public's decision, that the decision is not of major consequence?
I guess my response to that would be that I believe the public's perspective is captured in the Trail and Parks Master Plan, and that's our guiding document for the approving officer.
Thank you.
Mr. Swaby, you have a comment?
My comment to answer also is that as council has developed parks planning and the OCP over the year, you've started to refine and be very specific about where your parks are and the needs for parks. So that helps staff now in ways that we didn't have before in determining what you would like in terms of park or cash.
Okay. So I see no further speakers. The motion has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Your Worship, I would move that
bylaws
pass first. So the officer's appointment and delegation amendment bylaw 2014-7031.03 to delegate authority to the approving officer for determining the dedication of parkland or cash in lieu of parkland through the subdivision process pass first reading.
Seconded. I see no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Your Worship, I move that officer's appointment and delegation amendment bylaw 2014-7031.03 pass second reading.
Second. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion
And I
carries.
move the officer's appointment and delegation amendment bylaw 2014-7031.03 pass third reading.
Second motion. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Councillor Besser. Unresolved building deficiencies, notice on title, Section 5.7. It's requested that Council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to unresolved building deficiencies for the properties listed below. The staff recommendation is that motion by Council by resolution instruct the corporate officer to file a bylaw contravention notice respecting the properties listed below with the Land Title and Survey Authority of British Columbia under Section 5.7 of the Community Charter. There's 6. I don't think any of them have been pulled. I think all 6 are still valid. The very first property is 219 Bird Sanctuary Drive, construction of a secondary suite without a permit. Is there anyone in attendance who would like to speak to matters related to 219 Bird Sanctuary Drive? The second property is 495 Hamilton Street, authorization of secondary suites. Anyone in attendance tonight that would like to speak to matters related to 495 Hamilton Avenue? Third property is 520 Hillcrest Avenue, authorization of secondary suite. And in attendance tonight, I'd like to speak to matters related to 520 Hillcrest Avenue. The fourth property, 232 Tahoe Avenue, construction to finished basement without a permit. Anyone in attendance would like to speak to that Tahoe Avenue property? The number 5 is 2940 Thomas Street, construction of a secondary suite without a permit. Anyone in attendance tonight that'd like to speak to matters related to 2940 Thomas Street? And the final one is 1016 Thunderbird Drive, authorization of secondary suite. Anyone in attendance tonight that'd like to speak to matters related to 1016 Thunderbird Drive? Seeing none, if somebody would like to move the staff recommendation?
Your Worship, I'd like to move staff's recommendation that Council by resolution instruct the corporate officer to file a bylaw contravention notice respecting the properties listed below at the Land Title and Survey Authority of British Columbia under Section 57 of the Community Charter.
Okay, is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. I see no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into item E, governance review, roles, responsibilities, and relationships to be introduced by Governance Steering Committee Chair, Councillor Greaves. Councillor Greaves?
This recommendation, I have a few things written down here, and then we'll get on with it. But this recommendation to adopt the council charter, role of councillor, role of mayor, council staff relations, protocol, councillor declaration and mayor declaration with consultant staff and council. This guiding document was initiated as a result of our corporate strategic plan and taking responsibility. And it was decided by the Governance Review Steering Committee, which, by the way, was all of council. It started out with just a few councillors, but then it expanded to all of council, and I think that was a wise decision, by the way, as a must-do, medium priority to be completed within 12 months for the present council, and certainly in time for the next elected council. This is the first of many initiatives that will be implemented as a result of the Watson Consulting Group recommendations. And I would like to thank all of council on their participation throughout the process, as well as the Director of Human Resources, Terry Hartley, who is keeping us on track, as well as Mr. Chris Jackson and Mr. Guillermo Fierro. In simple terms, this document fleshes out the broad language in the Community Charter and gives all of council a much more specific understanding of their roles, responsibilities, and relationships with staff. Actually, not relationships, relationship with staff. That is a different connotation. Lastly, this is a guiding document, and it's not a bylaw, and it is only as good as council makes it. And we have to live by it to make it work. So should I move the recommendation, or that we have a delegation?
We do have a delegation.
Right.
And so before we start, if you finished your
Yes, I have.
Your introduction, the delegation, Mr. Jim Taylor.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So, like a lot of different rules and regulations, a lot of them just sound very benign. But in the wrong hands and under the wrong circumstances, they can also become quite malignant. And I do see the potential for just such a malignancy with the loose interpretation and the application of some of the provisions that are in this document. There are several troubling clauses, I should say, in this document, and one which would appear capable of gagging members of council can be found on page 56 of tonight's agenda. I'm not sure what the number is of the actual document, but I refer to one specific area that says inappropriate conduct at meetings can be dealt with, as discussed above, in one of three ways: a request by the presiding member for the behavior to cease, a motion of censure by the council, or expulsion of the member from the meeting. Fair enough. It goes on to say that there are consequences for serious breaches of agreed to performance expectations, whatever that is, such as a release of confidential information, which sounds very serious, improper use of influence, again, sounds like a serious matter, and conflicts of interest, again, a very serious matter. But then it refers to, on an equal footing, discreditable conduct such as bullying or intimidation. Now that sort of gets over into an area that isn't all that easy to define, and that's where I start to have some difficulty. And that particular infraction carries the same censures as if you were disclosing confidential information. And that can result in a motion of censure, a reassignment of committee or other civic appointments and duties. This is directed at the councillor who is guilty of the offense. And finally is the limitation of access to staff or to municipal resources. So, if a case of malignancy came out of this document, it could spawn the misuse of the above could include a simple majority of council electing to gag a member or members of council who are not in agreement with the simple majority. Council watchers don't need much imagination to see such a division occurring on this council. In the secrecy that's offered by an in-camera meeting, strong opposition and vigorous debate could be labeled as bullying and intimidation, with the result that the simple majority of that council could vote to censure or even put serious limitations on a councillor's access to staff or municipal resources, which would not only effectively gag the councillor or councillors in question, but effectively neuter them from being able to properly represent the taxpayers who elected them to represent them. Now, while I was sitting in on one of the governance committee meetings, I heard reference to controlling rogue councillors, and I also heard a frustration being expressed that some councillors simply wouldn't leave something alone. In its malignant form, this document could grant a simple majority of council the ability to shut down councillor or councillors who strongly feel that council is in error, and perhaps the dissenting councillor's opinion may in fact be based on superior knowledge of a certain subject. For example, if I wanted advice on decisions about building construction, a councillor who brings real-life working knowledge to the table is equipped to give me better information than someone who has very little or no knowledge at all. In the same vein, as if I would give far more weight to fire protection decisions if that information, the opinion, was coming from someone who has real-life experience in the profession, even if those opinions were at odds with the majority of council. So this document, in the malignant form, can be used to effectively gag and tie the hands of councillor or councillors who are strongly opposed to the majority of council to the detriment of the city as a whole. There's been a few examples in recent history of what likely could have been poor and costly decisions made by the majority of council, even when those opposed may have possessed superior knowledge upon which to base their decisions. One was my favorite, which is the shiny office. That's one example of a decision which was not supported by all of council, and in fact, the first time that particular motion went to a vote, it was defeated. But sadly, the records are kind of mute on what transpired between the first defeating vote and the second passing vote, which saw us build a $15 million building, and we never went to a public tender. And more recently, we have the whole Colliery Dam issue. That's another recent example of another costly and possibly a very poor decision that was made by the majority of council. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars have been spent, and untold angst and division has been caused in the community based on facts that people that have practical knowledge challenged right from the very beginning. Clearly, sometimes the majority of council just don't get it right. And perhaps many dollars could have been saved if the rogue councillors who simply wouldn't let it go had been listened to. There are several other items of concern, not the least of which appears on page 55 of the agenda, and it states that the mayor intervenes if a member of council or member of the public criticizes the staff at a meeting. This could be used to silence not only a council member, but members of the public if they wish to express their disagreement with some actions or conduct of staff. Would that mean that I could not say in this chamber that I think staff gave poor advice on a certain matter, which led to a costly mistake on the part of council? In its malignant form, I believe I wouldn't be allowed to say that. So how would that be consistent with the claim of wanting to be accountable, open, transparent, and responsible? Just a couple of closing questions. What impact is this going to have on anyone who wishes to be a new face on council this fall? Will they have to sign on to some of these questionable provisions that's in this document? And how difficult would it be for a new council just simply throw out the document if they don't like the way it's been written? I hope this council will not approve the document in its current form, give it back to the committee for some refinement, or better yet, just get rid of it. Just to rely on the provisions that are already contained in the community charter and apply the rules of conduct that are contained in Robert's Rules of Orders. And if we had done that earlier, the taxpayers would have saved $100,000 in this process. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no questions. Thank you very much. I might just ask staff, whatever the delegation has addressed now is within our area of responsibility right now. If somebody, the example was given, if somebody attacks staff, is there not recourse that we have at the present time?
Your Worship, I can address several of these comments if you wish. The issue around requesting that the mayor intervene if a member of the public or council criticizes staff publicly, the purpose of that is this is a council meeting and staff aren't in a position to be able to defend themselves in this environment. So it's usually taken to an in-camera meeting where it can be dealt with in a more sensitive manner. And that's usually why the mayor would intervene and suggest to either the councillor that we should take it in camera, or if it was a member of the public that a meeting be scheduled with the mayor in a private setting and then that be taken to an in-camera meeting. The issues around page 56 that talk about censure and expulsion and things of that nature, these are all powers that exist with council today. This is simply just documenting it so that everybody's aware of the powers that currently exist with council now. Some of the more serious concerns, like censure, requires procedural fairness, and council is quite familiar with this when they're in that quasi-judicial role. And council generally, when they are in that quasi-judicial role, take a higher level of care in ruling on matters of that nature and have to take into consideration procedural fairness. So there has to be a fair hearing to go to that extent. It's not something that can be taken lightly. And that's, I think, all I could say at this point.
Mm-hmm. I can recall an instance, maybe it was 2 or 3 years ago, maybe a little further, when somebody was at the podium and chose to challenge somebody on staff, and was very, very aggressive in the approach, and very outspoken in his condemnation of staff. And I think that would be an example where council and the mayor would intercede where the attack was on staff. But I can only recall one instance of that the last several years. So I think really I agree with you entirely on this thing, Mr. Howard, that I think really the powers that council has always had is unchanged. It's still there. All we're really doing in it is putting it out to the public so they know what those authorities are. I stand corrected if I'm wrong. Okay, it's. I think now we'll turn it over to our governance chair to proceed. If you wish to, I believe you have a committee recommendation here.
Yes, if you give me 2 seconds here. Sorry, Your Worship.
That's fine. Do you want me to read it for you, and then you can agree to it if you wish?
No, I could do it. Thank you. Committee recommendation that the council adopt the council charter, role of council, role of mayor, council staff relations protocol, councillor declaration, and mayor declaration, the documents as attached to the report in appendices A to F.
And you so move?
I so move.
Mm-hmm. Moved and seconded. Discussion. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. I don't have much of a problem with this particular document. whereas I will have some more trouble with the one that's to follow, that being the Elimina report. I have been asked a question or two about public input into this process. And I've had an inquiry or two, 3, from people who were not satisfied with the amount of public input. And so I would like staff maybe to, first of all, tell us what the possibility was and what the opportunities were with this particular HAPCOP report, and then to let me know if there is not a way of improving on that when we deal with the Elimina portion of this.
You're on.
Yes, Your Worship, for the Alison Habkirk materials, there were open governance steering committee meetings, and I believe at the last one, actually, the chair had a portion of the agenda for public input in particular. So these are guiding documents as opposed to bylaws. There's a different process for the Elimina type work, and I'll let Ian Howitt speak to those.
Your Worship, the work that's being referred to as Elimina's document is actually the draft procedure bylaw. And unlike a lot of bylaws, the draft procedure bylaw does require public notification. So there's a couple of steps involved in this. One is, first, the procedure bylaw is being dealt with through a council committee, which hasn't been done in the past. It's traditionally been the job of staff to bring forward draft recommendations on the procedure bylaw, and that hasn't happened this time. It's gone to a council committee first, and it's been worked through the council committee. Staff believe that process is still in its early stages. We've only just seen the introduction from Elimina. We've heard concerns. Staff had some concerns as well, and we intend to bring back another draft to the committee that is reflecting some of the concerns we heard from the public and from members of the committee and that council had heard. We expect that process will likely go through at least 1 or 2 more iterations at the committee level. Then it has to be advertised, and the advertisement is through 2 newspapers. To do that, there's certainly an expectation that you have to educate the public on what you're actually proposing in the draft. And so that can be done a number of ways. It could be through a public meeting, it could be through an open house, or simply posting the procedure bylaw for people's comments. So that hasn't been resolved yet. We'll ask for the committee's recommendation on how that process will unfold, but we expect that we're still several months away from this actually being in a form that council would consider as a bylaw.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Kipp.
Thank you. Well, it'd be funny to say that I support this because I don't. I heard some of the same laws coming out in Thailand under military law where not more than 5 politicians can get together. All this stuff has been coming out for quite a while now. I've watched this for 20 years. I've watched my responsibilities as a councillor, as mentioned in the Local Government Act, go from that I work for the community to now it's to consider the well-being and interests of the municipality and its community. The corporation comes first now. When I hear in this document that it's a waste of time if 9 councillors contact the CAO, for example, for an hour a week, then that would ruin a whole day of his time. Well, from my perspective, a $200,000 a year employee would, if it was my employee, would live at my house and answer my call and do everything anytime I wanted to talk to them. And so to say that it's based on an 8-hour day is almost ludicrous to me, that an employment scale of that much works day and night. And for someone in the position of this person that wrote this to say that we'd be wasting an employee's time by talking to them, I mean, I've heard tonight where we have to listen to staff and we shouldn't listen to innuendo or anything else. I don't know who I represent anymore. The Charter of Conduct, it's got council rules. It's telling me how I have to work. I don't hear much about how staff has to do it. It's just how we're distanced from a lot of it. I mean, when we get elected, we come in as the council and we can barely make a change. We can't really affect the staff. We can't really do anything. But a CAO gets elected and they can, or gets appointed, and they can literally let people go, fire people, change people, do whatever they want. It really is their corporation. And these rules to me are somewhat offensive. I took my oath over a Bible when we get sworn in, and that's my oath. To say that I have to ask, and anything that'll take more than 30 minutes to get an answer on, is then have to go to a council motion. I agree with Mr. Taylor that this is, especially for a guy like me, who does question things, who does not like things to be all smooth all the time and look like it's really good, who's not image over reality. We have differences. We debate, we argue, and it's taken personal sometimes, and that's tough, and we apologize to each other. This, to me, has been a 20-year process of taking over council. It's been there. I give out at the Watson thing a 9-pager that came from the 90s with the exact problems we have today, with the exact things that are going on, the same questions. Even Mrs. Watson said, wow, you really didn't need to hire me, did you? So for this to come through now, just before an election, it seems to be being pushed through. I could go over page after page after page on this where it's just inconsistent with what I, like here on page 46 of the report where it says some of the duties. It goes down to council, emergency plans and policy. That's councils to review and decide, and administration is the develop and implement is administration. Well, God, we've had exercises going on here that we don't even know of, and they're kept confidential from us. So how am I, as a councillor with some of that knowledge, to make that decision? And this separates us even more, and I would suggest marginalizes anybody with any specific intelligences. So I can't support this. Like I say, the staff person that wrote this has a partner that's kept files on people in the same positions. You know, it's just crazy. We got to clean house with this stuff and make it a working organization where we don't just listen to one group of people, raise our hand, and go home. It's not my idea of the job, so I can't support any of this.
Okay, Councillor Belcher. Councillor, you're not going to? No. Okay, Councillor McKay. No. Well, you were on top, and I pushed it, and then something happened.
But
you're on.
Bill can go off. That's fine.
You go. I put you back on.
Thank you.
You're on.
Well, I just have a question and then some comments. But a question to staff: does any other municipality in the province of British Columbia have a municipality charter of conduct, or whatever you wish to refer to this as, beyond the charter that we all operate under currently?
Your Worship, I can't answer that question specifically. I can say that this flowed from the strategic plan, from council, from the strategic plan. You asked, one of the priorities became taking responsibility to become an excellent municipal government. To do that, one of the initiatives that council arrived at was a governance review. The governance review recommended this, and this is what council accepted. The implementation plan was for Ms. Habkirk to do this work. The work is now done, and it's for the council to decide.
But in answer to Councillor Bessick's question, the consultant did identify at the last governance meeting that there were other municipalities that had these in place.
And we will be able to have those other municipalities that have this in place provided to us, I suspect. You know, it's interesting because 2/3 or better of us sit at the regional district of Nanaimo. Budget's about $135 million. I think we're responsible for about 80% of it. And the governance out there seems to manage quite nicely. Thank you. And so, you know, in the response that I just received from our HR director is didn't provide me with any information that suggests that there is other municipalities or cities within our province identified. Sure, our governance report, if I was a consultant, I would suggest that we probably might wish to undertake this exercise too. I heard from Mr. Howitt that in his response to our mayor that the process exists. He said it twice, that the process that we follow, that we are with the BC Community Charter and Robert's Rules of Order, we have the process. This is just a reaffirmation of our vows. We have access to countless consultants, countless legal counsel, a battery of professionals, the finest in the country. And here we have to provide some new and other form of what I would consider paralysis by analysis. And the thing that we probably are going to need more than anything is to increase the councillors' legal fees as we proceed through more rules and regulations on how we conduct ourselves in the favor of or not in the favor of those who we offend or don't offend or support or don't support if we approve this. I have stated from the beginning when we filled out our monkey forms or whatever they were called that we sent in, I had no problem letting our facilitator know who the dissenting voice was. No problem on the questions that were asked. And that to me is the openness and transparency that we all so desperately seek on this council. So for me, we have the BC Community Charter, we have the Robert's Rules of Order, we have staff over there to look after us when we get out of control, we have our mayor to care for us, to steer us in the right direction as our chair when things get out of hand. We heard from our mayor that only on one occasion did he think that somebody came to the podium that was untoward. Towards staff. So from my perspective, we have everything we need. I don't need to sign another oath of office that is a policy and not a bylaw that will not supersede or trump the community charter. I will not be supporting the document. Thank you.
I don't know that it would supersede the community charter, but Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Did I hear the chair of the committee say that these were guidelines?
Guiding document.
Guiding document.
Yep.
They look a lot more official than that to me when I have to sign off on them. But thank you for that. Guidelines are guidelines, and when I sign off and attest to, that's something quite a bit more official, particularly when it's got sanctions involved. I understand what Ms. Hartley was saying about the strategic plan and how we wanted to see, the community wanted to see a better government. I get that. Most people in the community look at this organization as the corporation of the city of Nanaimo. And there's the administration portion, there's the governing portion. The two of them go together. I found it very surprising that through this whole process, we didn't seem to have a focus on working together as the two entities. All I've ever seen is things directing at what council needs to do, things that seem to be binding the hands of council, things that we're being recommended on how we behave. I don't see, the community charter, section 115, the first two items say, A, to consider the well-being and interests of the municipality and its community. This is council's roles. B, to contribute to the development and evaluation of the policies and programs of the municipality, respecting its services and other activities. I very much believe in those. And I would love to participate more in them. But as Councillor Kipp said, when a city manager is permitted to make significant decisions relative to the provision of services unilaterally, and then come to us for the blessing, if you will, I would rather be part of that. I would rather work together with our senior leadership team. I would rather we all work together. I would rather we respected each other instead of trying to tie one party's hands. And so therefore, anything that would tie the hands of the governing body, I can't support. I'm sorry.
Okay, Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Hartley, if I may. How many meetings did we have in the public forum, Terry, with regard to our strategic plan?
Oh, Worships, sorry, but there were interviews with 20-some community leaders. There was workshops, 3 public workshops. There were specialized workshops for different groups like youth and seniors and community groups. There were 3 SurveyMonkey surveys. So there were a number, quite a number, and I don't have the number.
Well over 1,000 people had input into this. Yes. And out of that, as you said, one of the strategic ideals was taking responsibility. This council, like it or not, have been viewed, or were being viewed, as perhaps a bit dysfunctional. And I don't want to be a part of a dysfunctional council. I look at this document, I think, this is great. I wish I'd had this before I became a councillor and had the opportunity to read it. And I'm sure Mr. Taylor's concerned that we may have difficulty having anyone step forward to run for council when they have to have put their signature to a document like this. I think these are wonderful guidelines, and I absolutely agree with the chair. Councillor agrees that these are guiding principles for every council to follow. Where would we be if, per se, and I'm sure Toronto must have had these similar guidelines because there were censorship issues there. And I don't think that'll ever happen with this council. But if it does, it's good to have guidelines to follow. I see no problem with this. I welcome it, and I think it's been a good process, and I'm more than willing to put my signature to it.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think the first thing is that we have to remember that Council advised Watson that we wanted this. Watson didn't come along unsolicited saying, you need this. We asked for this. We asked for this report. The report, I think, reflects reality. There is a clear distinction. There's a clear distinction between staff and council. There needs to be a clear distinction between the work of both. Council sets policy, sets strategic direction, allocates resources, those kinds of things, and staff takes that direction and operationalizes it. We need in our minds to be able to understand that those are 2 different functions. And all this document does is it takes the language, the legal language from the charter, and puts it into layman's terms. That's all it does. It doesn't add to it, doesn't change it, doesn't make it any more onerous. It simply changes it into plain language, which is what we, our province and probably the rest of Canada strives for with legislation, is put this into plain language. And that's what this does. It puts it into plain language. The sanctions are there in law. There's nothing new in our charter. The sanctions are there. The mayor and the rest of council have that authority now. Nobody has to sign this. Once you're elected, you don't have to sign it, but you will have to face the public and tell them that you refuse to sign a document that sets out rules of behavior in a body like this where things can get quite heated. So you don't have to sign it, but you might have to explain why you won't. There's nothing to compel a signature. There's nothing draconian about this. Yeah, and maybe they were the exact problems we had 25 or 100 years ago. Sure. But this council heard from the public that they're fed up with that. They're fed up with listening to us sit here and bicker and snarl at one another and snarl at people that come to the podium. They're tired of that. They want us to act in an adult manner. They want us to use proper behavior from this table. So I don't see anything wrong with this. I think that bullying and intimidation is a pretty scary thing to happen, and it really does constrain people from saying what they think. And if we can say bullying's no good in the community and bullying's no good here, and this is what we're going to do if you insist and persist in bullying and intimidating from this table. So I think it's great. I support it. And when it comes time to sign it, I'll do it.
Okay. Councillor Kipp, you're the second time around. Can we get Councillor Patchy in? You haven't spoken to this before, have you? Go ahead, and then we'll come back.
Thank you. Well, we asked for it. We've got a report. I remember how pleased I was with the Watson procedure. I really liked getting some stuff off my chest. And it was important for me to do that. And while I can't remember how often I have not said during the process with Alison Hopkirk that, I wondered sometimes, why am I here? All of this is common sense and common decency of how we treat each other. And from that point of view, all of this was superfluous as far as I'm concerned. But that said, I'm going to vote in favor of it because there's absolutely nothing wrong, other than the money that's been spent, with having a refresher that, if nothing else, attempts to get us on a different footing with staff. So, and that is something that I think needs to be done. And that is what I'm looking for in this Hopkirk document. It is extremely important, as Councillor McKay says, that we want to be one team. We want to work with each other. We want to trust each other. But it's a two-way street. And if that requires more input from us as elected people, I think also a message, just by virtue of this report, has gone out to staff. That maybe there are some times, too, that they will have to look at us a little bit different. On the whole, the only item in here that I have a severe problem with is the limitation of staff time. I just don't like that. And if I need more than 30 minutes of their time, then I want to have that, and I think I deserve to have that. If that gets abused at times, and I suspect it has, then there are other ways of dealing with that. So what I really would like to do is make a motion to get that, an amendment, to get that 30-minute time limit of staff time out of here. And I will make such a motion if I can find a seconder for that, because that is my one and only big problem with this document. It's common sense. It's how we interact with each other, between ourselves and with staff. As Councillor Brennan says, all this is a delegalized kind of language that already exists in the Community Charter and the Local Government Act. There's really nothing new in here. So with that, I will make that amendment to dispense with the 30-minute time limit of staff time.
I'd second that motion, Your Worship.
Okay. we can vote on the amendment then. I was just going to say from my own point, but then you rushed that in quickly. So we're going to have to just have discussion on the amendment at this point. And the amendment is the 30-minute timeline. And so I might just start off by saying, to me, I find it quite academic because I think the 30-minute timeline, and I can only speak as mayor, I very much doubt I would find it objectionable to restrict anyone to that. It's a guideline. It's something that people should be aware of. And I very much doubt that if people went in to see Mr. Howard or our city manager, Mrs. Swaby, and the discussion went on for 35 minutes, I doubt very much they would say, oh, gee, you're 5 minutes over, you have to leave. But that said, I don't think it's a hill to die on. I think if this is something that people want to strike this 30-minute thing out of everything else that's in it, I don't have a strong objection to it. So, Councillor Kipp, do you want to speak on the amendment?
No.
Nope. Councillor Brennan, on the amendment? Go ahead.
I think that I was trying to find it, find out what page it was.
Page 59.
51 page
51
59 at the top of the page.
Okay.
The second bullet.
Because my memory was that it wasn't as strict as it's being presented. My memory was that if you wanted to ask staff to do some work, some research work, that required more than 30 minutes, the city manager would have to approve that. And if the city manager wouldn't, then you could come to council. But it's not the same as sitting down with the city manager and going over some issues that are important to you or coming up. For me, it was this persistent questioning of staff to find old documents, do research that is not connected necessarily with anything that the rest of us know about, and sending staff out to do a lot of work. If you want to talk to the city manager, I would suggest it just seems a reasonable kind of business-like way of approaching things. You phone the city manager and you ask for an appointment. I mean, if the city manager's around, or if Mr. Lindsay or Mr. Lawrence is around and you're there and you slip in and want to talk to them, go ahead. That's not a problem. But if you want to be sure that you've got enough time to discuss your issue, then make an appointment, because that's what happens in the business world. People can't just come in and sit down at your desk and take up work time, because you may have a deadline you're working to. You may have a 3 o'clock deadline that you've got to get done, and yet you're being asked to stop now and either do some research that you don't know why, or take the city manager's time when he's got a report to prepare for council that night. So I think we use some common sense and some business-like behaviors where you make appointments to see people. I don't like the attitude that we are somehow entitled to staff time when we want it. I think we need to treat our staff the way that you would in any other business situation, where you would say, can we have coffee on Friday? I want to talk to you about this. Or I want to talk to you about a few things. But do it in a way that allows staff to do the work that we're paying them for. I mean, I've heard it mentioned before, lots of money going out there paying for staff. Let's behave in that way, instead of thinking that staff are there at our beck and call, because they shouldn't be.
Okay, Councillor Kipp.
No, not on the amendment.
Okay, so, you're on the amendment? Sorry, go ahead.
Well, as it relates to the amendment, I'd just like to comment on the hill to die on comment and the 30-minute component, and whether you're going to sit with the city manager or someone else for longer than. There's also that thing called marginalization. And should a request be made for information and you can't forget that we get, and none of us can forget, we get our agendas on Thursday after 4 o'clock. So on Friday or Monday is the only opportunity when there's something on the agenda that requires information reasonably, and might take longer than. And so when that request comes forward to whomever at City Hall from a member of council, and if you were told then that, well, this is going to take longer than, it says in here, 30 minutes, then you can either go in camera or you can get 4 other members of council to vote in support. Well, you can't do that till Monday night, then it's too late. So I'm sure that this is all with good intentions, and I'm sure that it's with all about good governance. But that thing called marginalization, if it's information that may or may not, like who's to say? So, and I certainly know that I have asked of staff's time over my terms on council, and I'll continue to. And I can be rejected or cared for. I made a request for freedom of information. I have no problem making that request, and it took a lot of staff time. And I'm really happy that I did, because it's really helped me in the performance of my duties as elected to do, and really cleared many of my misunderstandings or mysteries. So I think that when you think you need some information, however long it might take, and you might not get it right away, but you should be able to ask for it, and you should be able to expect that you may receive it in a timely manner in order to perform your duties that you've been elected to do. And there's not one person up here that knew what their duties were really before they got here. And so you have to ask lots of questions, and you have to get lots of help on lots of issues that we have a whole lot of professional help with. And because we're lay people, we need to ask lots of questions. We need lots of help. I'm certainly not naive enough to think that I know everything there is to know about being a politician until you are one. And so, Your Worship, I will not.
Okay. Councillor Greaves, did you?
No, I decided.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we're going to deal with the amendment first, and the amendment, I think, maybe just it's to strike the 30-minute time limit.
That is correct, Your Worship. You're voting right now on the amendment to remove the 30-minute limitation for staff time.
Okay.
I can just say what it says here. Where a request for information from a councillor requires staff committing a significant amount of time, and then it says more than 30 minutes, to respond, the city manager will be asked to approve the work or direct the request to council for consideration. So it's more around research to get back. So if you strike the 30 minutes, it would say significant amount of time. I assume
And
that's the amendment, but.
Okay, and Councillor Batchy, you're familiar with that, and you're still.
That's exactly the way it reads.
Okay. So on the amendment, all those. Sorry.
Can I get clarification on that, please?
Okay.
If I understand the motion, the way I heard it originally was to strike that whole paragraph. Am I correct?
Well,
Councillor Patchy, it's your motion.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, Your Worship, was that a yes? So the motion is to remove the entire paragraph?
To remove that whole paragraph as Ms. Hartley read it. Where a request for information from a councillor requires staff committing a significant amount of time, more than 30 minutes to respond, the city manager will be asked to approve the work or to direct the request to council for consideration.
Thank you.
Okay, so all those in, I see no further questions, all those in favor? Opposed? We have 3 opposed, so the motion fails. I'm sorry, the motion passes. And you need those that the dissenting side would be Councillor Greaves, Councillor Brennan, and Mayor Tan opposed, balanced council in favor.
We got it.
Okay. Now, on the motion itself. Yep, Councillor Kemp.
Thank you. I heard from one of my peers that would have liked to have known this before we come on to be a councillor. In the 6 years, we have heard from LGLA, Allison, Jerry, George Cuff, George Paul, lawyers. So we've had this information over and over again. I've also heard tonight that we chose this. I have here the report to Council Committee of the Whole, November 2012, and it's a governance review, and it talks about the staff recommendation. And in terms of reference, audit of the current policy setting environment by measuring against the operating philosophy articulated in the strategic plan, assesses the city's governance to date, including but not limited to use of committees, roles and authority of committees, timing and format of meetings, policies related to in-camera meetings, practice of preparing council for decision-making, including council briefings, delegated authority to staff, including delegation bylaw, council meetings, including procedure bylaw. Recommendation, provide recommendations to the city's policy setting environment intended to meet the objectives of the strategic plan. It's turned into council's roles and responsibilities, 20 pages today. So you say you asked for council roles? You say that, but it doesn't show this in our RFP. But it certainly has turned into that. So I don't believe I asked for this report. I do believe that we have different functions, but we're part of an organization. We must function together. Interpreted by bureaucrats is what this is. There isn't a businessman that we've sent this to say, how would you run your corporation with your employees and you're the boss? So that's part of my view on that business sense we talk about. And we hear professionalism. I have signed the front of a few checks. That's someone's paycheck. So I have a bit of business sense on this. And it's KISS, keep it simple, stupid. This adds 20 pages to a one-paragraph document that already outlines our jobs. How does that make it simpler? This is pick and choose at its finest because, especially now that we've got rid of that 30. You talk about 30 minutes being significant time, then don't take over a 15-minute coffee break because significant time would be 30-minute coffee breaks. So the language, the manipulation to me, the marginalization, this document doesn't include any big 20 pages of council's roles. We've slowly had the card game shifted out to us. We've slowly given the information of the professionals again, and it's leading us down a path that I think is taking power away from council and building a wall instead of a relationship. So someone tell me how this so much language makes it plain and simple. Someone explain to me that we haven't heard this from another $100,000 worth of people, bureaucrats telling us our role and responsibility. I like the role and responsibility the public tells me to do. Thank you.
Councillor Breeze.
Oh, thank you, Worship. I'm a bit surprised this is coming out now because we have lots of opportunity at the committee meetings to discuss this, but it is.
Go ahead, Councillor Breeze, go ahead. I distinctly remember you not interrupting anyone else.
Well, it's funny. I'm just looking at this right now, conduct at meetings. Councillors do not interrupt or comment out of turn when members of the public or other members of council are speaking.
So you and Diane shouldn't talk.
Come on now.
I just have to repeat that once again. And this is why we have this. Secondly, code of conduct, I was just looking for some, I think Councillor Bestwick was asking, and I don't know how lengthy they are, although some of them are lengthy. Toronto, Saskatoon, Brampton, Kingston, Waterloo, Mississauga, and that was just a cursory view of what cities have a code of conduct. I think this is, we have to go back to what got us here, and it was the strategic plan, and what evolved from there, and here we are. And it's not just the councillors' roles, it's the role of mayor, and it's the relations protocol between council and staff. So it's not just council, and it's a declaration. And You know, they do this in school, you know, for bad kids. Make them sign a contract to make them behave. And this is what we're doing here. Oh, even the mayor has one. He has to sign one as well. So he has to behave. And and I heard this many times. It is nothing new. And I don't know, unless we can sever certain things that are very contentious, and there's a whole bunch of stuff here, and I mentioned one that we have to sign our names off to. Councillors refrain from criticizing staff in public or in media. Councillors refrain from building overly close or personal relationships with the city manager or city staff. You've got to stop that, Jim. So it really is nothing new, and I think we're making a mountain out of a molehill. I really do. It just fleshes out what the community charter says, and I understand there's underlining distrust and so on and so forth from various councillors, and I don't think it ties our hands. It's the same as we've always had. It just fleshes it out, it spells it out, so we can say, see, like I did with Councillor Kipp, see, don't interrupt. It says right there. So
It's not a policy.
I know. It's a guiding document. So that's all I have to say about that.
Okay.
I'm obviously...
Whoops, sorry. Okay. I'm going to be supporting it, but I'd like to ask staff, and I don't know who's going to wants to answer it. I mean, it's been asked before, but I'd just like to, once again, almost like this report, hear it again. Is there anything in this report that we're asked to vote on right now that's onerous or changes from the power we previously had?
No, Your Worship.
Don't all jump in at once here. Go ahead.
Your Worship, no, it doesn't. Everything that's written and documented exists today. It's never been documented before that I'm aware of.
So really, all we're doing here, I know there's a lot of angst and concern, but we're simply documenting, putting into writing the policy we've always had. Is that not correct?
I'm not sure if you'd call it policy. It's more
procedure,
process, or in some cases common law when you get into the more serious issues, and in some cases the charter. But in most cases, it's just process that we've followed over many. Not just we. When I say we, local government, and then of course the more serious issues have been dictated to us by common law in terms of the quasi-judicial issues and censorship and things like that.
I guess the point I'm trying to make, though, is that there's been some suggestion that this is something new. The requirements on council haven't been imposed previously, but I'm trying to suggest here that what we're being asked to vote on now has been a general policy that council has always had available and continues to follow to this day. Over.
Your Worship, I'm not going to go so far as to say that council has followed this.
I don't disagree.
All of this has been available to council. All of these tools have been available to council. They're simply being documented now.
No, I accept your clarification on that, and I don't disagree. Okay, question on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? We have Councillor McKay, Councillor Kipp, and Councillor Bestwick opposed. Balance of council in favor. The motion passes. Moving into the 2014, but I think since I do want to do one serious thing and one facetious thing, if I may at this time. The serious thing is I do want to thank Councillor Greaves for putting a huge amount of work in. He really did. He took this to heart and he ran with it, and he did an incredibly detailed job. And I just want to say on behalf of this council that I appreciate all the effort you went in. Not everyone agreed with it, that's fine. But no one can overlook the amount of work that you put into it. I also want to thank our staff and certainly everyone involved that worked so hard to see this through. As I say, not everyone agreed, but it was a long process. It involved all of council on it. It was a committee of a whole. And so everyone throughout the length of this thing, and I don't know if staff can give me an idea. Well, I should be able to ask the chair of this thing how many months this is covered, but it started last fall, I believe, and
a year, I think.
Maybe it's been a whole year now, and so it's a lot of work, a lot of time, and I just want to thank everyone for being involved. Now, the second point is a little bit facetious, but it's quite serious. If you're the acting mayor right now, Councillor Greaves, so if you would like to come over and man the chair, I will be absented momentarily here.
Okay.
Can't see the chair, and
Where's the crown?
We're right there. Right there.
Okay, we're on the 2014 Grants Advisory Committee recommendation. Who would like to read out the staff's recommendation?
I will.
Hit your little switch there.
Yeah, that council award a permissive tax exemption for the 2015 tax year to the BC Old Age Pensioners Organization Branch Number 4, PTE 02. And I'd like to speak to that.
Certainly, if we have a seconder. Seconder, Councillor Paggi? Certainly.
There was a question from a member of the public, Mr. Boland. There was an error, or the amount wasn't included in the recommendation tonight, and the amount is $1,650 for that tax exemption, and that does meet all the criteria set down by the Grants Advisory Committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Johnston. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Those opposed? Motion's carried. All righty. And G, matching grants policy. Is that you, Councillor Johnston, as well, or not?
Not necessarily.
Okay, who would like to read out the staff's recommendation?
I would be pleased to read it. Staff's recommendation is that Council approve the proposed matching grants policy to ensure that a matching grants partner contribution does not consist of monies previously funded by general taxpayer contributions transfer.
Seconder? Second. Councillor Bestwick, would you like to speak? Councillor Kipp, did you want to speak?
Yeah, on this one, it says previously funded by general taxpayer contributions. That's just Nanaimo taxpayer contributions, right? Not federal taxpayer.
Yes.
Just Nanaimo.
Thank you.
Councillor Paggi.
My question is just, have we had examples where this has occurred? And are we catching up, or what's the purpose of it?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, this came up when I believe Council was first discussing the Morden Mine application, and we were asked to look at a draft policy for Council's consideration in this regard. And really, what it was at that time, the concern of Council was that the Morden Mine Society was looking to receive a grant from the city and also a grant from the NEDC. The purpose of this policy was to put in place tools so that Council had knowledge that there was an application for more than just one other entity that was receiving city funding. So in other words, if the city provided funding to the NEDC, we wanted to know, or the city wanted to know that from the applicant, that they were also asking for money from the NEDC, so that Council could decide whether they wanted to consider the entire amount from all sources that the city funds, or didn't care and didn't mind doing what we've been affectionately calling double dipping.
Follow up, if I may.
Yes.
Did that language, when it came to us, not read whatever the amount was minus what the NEDC might have been giving?
Yes, Your Worship, that's true. That's the language that came out of the discussion following the direction from Council to staff to come up with a policy to address these issues.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I remember the motion. It was about the Colliery Mine, and I made that motion, and I didn't have to amend it because I said in the motion that it be $7,500 minus whatever contribution was received from NEDC, which in effect meant they wouldn't even bother going to NEDC because there would be no purpose whatsoever in that case. But I think that is the way to do it, is to do it on an individual basis. Because I think we're using this very blunt instrument here that that this can never happen. And we then get into a situation where there's the you first. You go to the RDN first. No, RDN says, oh, no, you go to the city first. Nobody gets anything done. We have, all of us voted some here for a contribution, and I was going to pull it out of the air, but to the hospice via permissive tax exemptions. We go to the regional district, and we support that there too. This motion wouldn't allow that. This motion wouldn't allow us to be at the RDN table and grant money to the hospice and then come back here and grant a permissive tax exemption to hospice. There's just so many examples of that, and I think what we need to do is do it on a case-by-case basis. And I think this is just too blunt an instrument. We need to use something more precise. And I think the more precise thing would be our own judgment on an individual basis.
Okay. I just was going to say I agree. Actually, I think it was Councillor Beswick that may have said that some of the money, often about 80% of the money that goes through the RDN, is actually coming from the Nanaimo taxpayers. So it is an attempt to try to eliminate a lot of the double dipping, and for that reason, I would support it as well. Mr. Swaby, go ahead.
Your Worship, and I'll have staff jump in here if I get this wrong, but I just want to make sure that it's clear for Council that the policy talks about that we make sure that you're aware of all funding options, that we wouldn't withhold it from coming to you. It's just that you're aware of all the funding that's happening before you make a decision.
Okay. Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I personally don't think it goes far enough, to be honest with you. We know that there's people in this community. I watched it prior to being elected to council, sitting in the gallery and watching council members saying, well, have you been to the RDN yet? Oh, yes, they've already approved it. Okay. And it gets approved anyway. We know we have people in the community that are going to NEDC requesting funding, and they're getting it. So that comes out of this back pocket. So then they go to Tourism Nanaimo and they get it, and it comes out of this back pocket. Then they go to the RDN and it comes out of this front pocket. Then they come to the city and it comes out of this front pocket. And they know how to play the game. And anything that we can stop, I don't mind giving money to community organizations to do their good work. But it's when they don't do anything else. They just keep going around town looking for all the different pockets they can get money from. And that's just not right.
I don't disagree. One little point I was going to make out, that when you reached into the pocket for NEDC, Tourism Nanaimo is in the same pocket. It's just one pocket.
But I've seen contributions go from both the organizations.
Yeah, well, hopefully you're going to try to eliminate some of those issues. Okay, I see no further discussion on that. The motion is before you. Although
no, I do have one.
You do? Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Brandon.
So this is so that when someone comes in front of us and we say, have you been to the RDN yet? And they say no. So we grant the money. Then they go to the RDN. We're only 7 votes out there. Say it's for hospice. You're going to have some problems. And I think, I know there's councillors here who would support hospice here and at the RDN because we believe in it. So I don't know why we have to tie the discretion of council. That's what this does. It ties the discretion that we have, and we do have discretion, and we should exercise it.
If I might, I just think that in the case of staff, our staff obviously put together our agendas, and wherever there is a request for funding, that might be a trigger for staff to look at it and come back and say, by the way, we have investigated this, and they have or have not applied elsewhere. Maybe they won't be able to cover all the bases, but hopefully they'll cover certainly the RDN.
But it would just then become the strategic way of obtaining money, would be to always go to the City of Nanaimo first and wait to go to the RTM, because the question's going to be asked. You're standing there. I say, have you been to the RDN yet? They say no. We say okay. Then they go to the RDN. So this is too blunt an instrument. It doesn't serve the purpose we need it to do.
Okay, Councillor McKay.
Is it not my understanding that this also says before or after? So that if somebody comes here looking for funding, and then it says that they have to notify us after as well. So if they go to the RDN, they're then obligated to come back to us and inform us.
Does the motion, in your opinion, from staff cover that?
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay.
Your Worship, there's just no perfect system here. This is just meant to provide as much information to council as you can at the time you're making a decision, specifically excluding the fact that it doesn't cover people who have PTEs who then come for a grant. This isn't covering that. But this is just an awareness and a policy that we would be telling all the applicants that we need to know all the funding that you are or are intending to get and report to council.
Okay. You're done, Councillor McKay? So the motion is that council approve the proposed matching grants policy, and we'll call the motion question rather than all those in favor. Opposed? Councillor Brennan and Councillor Kipp opposed. Balance council in favor. The motion passes. Moving into item 9, community services invasive plant management strategy, to be introduced by Mr. Rob Lawrence, environmental planner. And the purpose is to have council review and consider the City of Nanaimo's invasive plant management strategy. Now, we do have, before you start on that, one delegation, Ms. Joanne Sales, Director, Broombusters Invasive Plant Society. Come down, ma'am.
No. Oh, sorry.
Speak with you tonight representing Broombusters again. When we heard that the focus of the meeting today was going to be about invasive plant strategy, we asked that we could talk about 2 issues based on our experience of removing Scotch broom from the parks and roads of Nanaimo since 2008, and that's 9 years. First, we want to be very clear about the fact that we are, as Broombusters, we're totally supportive of the plan that Rob Lawrence is presenting. We may be focusing on different aspects of controlling invasive plants, but we're all working together towards one common goal. We believe it's wise and prudent for the city to take a strong stand dealing with invasive plants and to approach it from many angles. Invasive plants are a relatively new problem for humans to deal with, but a very serious one. The two greatest threats to biodiversity worldwide are development and invasive species. So we're not talking about a cosmetic issue. We're talking about the health of our ecosystem and the survival of native plants and animals that live on these incredible islands. So whether we're talking about Scotch broom, gorse, Japanese knotweed, ivy, giant hogweed, we're dealing with a serious issue, and you know that. We Broombusters did something very new this year. In all the groups on Vancouver Island, from Campbell River to North Cowichan to Port Alberni, we kept track of the hours that volunteers cut broom. I knew that every year I'd been spending about 80 hours on the road cutting broom. I think that's a sign of insanity. But as it turns out, I was not alone. A handful of Nanaimo Broombuster volunteers this year cut broom in Nanaimo for over 400 hours since May 1st. I want to repeat that. 400 hours of cutting broom by Nanaimo volunteers with no expense to the city. Imagine if the city had to pay for that. These volunteers have been working quietly and invisibly in Nanaimo from anywhere from 3 to 9 years. They are not part of the Parks Warden program. They are just doing what they do for weeks on end, going out every other day or every day for 6 weeks. Now, why would a resident go out and volunteer cutting broom for 40 to 50 hours in a 5 to 6 week period? Because they care about Nanaimo, they care about the ecosystem, and they care about the future. They are one of Nanaimo's secret treasures, so secret that you probably don't even know about them. I am here to speak for them. And this is what they are asking for. First of all, is support in removing the broom that they cut without causing undue stress in the Parks Department or Public Works. Other municipalities actually have a budget for removing the broom that's cut by volunteers. Qualicum Beach, Parksville, Lanceville, Courtney, Port Alberni, etc. It doesn't turn into a free-for-all. It doesn't mean that volunteers are cutting everywhere. The truth is there aren't that many volunteers and there isn't that much broom. But when a pile shows up, we want to know that the city can happily remove it. As another strategy, North Cowichan chose to hire a tree service chipping truck to chip the broom at the end of the season. And they allocated $3,000 this year for a tree service to chip the broom. And we're happy when the chipping broom got all the broom chipped in one day for about $1,000. So we're not really asking for that much. It can go faster than is expected. But we'd like to know that there is a budget for removal of broom that we cut. The second issue is our plan is to get rid of broom in Nanaimo, and we believe council shares that goal. And no one wants to feel that they're wasting their time or that others are making it impossible for them to succeed. And it's so frustrating to work hard to remove broom from parks and neighborhoods only to find broom taking over whole fields and spreading seeds from uncared for property, vacant lots, and land owned by businesses and industries. Last time I spoke to council, one of you asked if any other city has a bylaw against broom and other invasive plants, and we now have an answer. Yes. Parksville passed a bylaw in December 2012 prohibiting landowners from allowing noxious weeds to grow on their property. And I will email a copy of that to each of you tomorrow. Parksville bylaw is complaint-driven. Most neglectful landowners think that no one cares if broom covers their field. Obviously, the city doesn't care, or it would have a bylaw. That's how they think. But once the landowners see the printed bylaw, everything changes. Suddenly, the broom on their lot, backyard, backfield, or fence line becomes top priority. They do not want a violation filed. Suddenly, they're asking, how do we remove the broom, and how much time do we have before a violation is filed? In most cases, a bylaw violation notice will not be necessary. There will be voluntary compliance, and the broom will just disappear. If a bylaw is filed and ignored 3 times, then the city pays to have the brooms or the invasive plants removed, and the expense of the removal is added to the following year's taxes. So there's no additional expense for taxpayers. We think this is also the strategy in Calgary. It's fairly common. I want to show more photos of, these are pictures that you've seen before, but these are vacant lots in Nanaimo, covered with broom. Okay, here's another one. And here is a park, Med Road. There's another picture there. And there's one of the first piles that you're going to see. This is the kind of pile we're talking about that we need help in getting rid of. Now I'm going to show you some of the real people that are out there cutting the broom. This handful of volunteers are doing amazing things in the city. And until recently, they were pretty much unknown to anyone except in the Parks Department. And they are doing what they're doing quietly and invisibly. They don't want recognition, they just want support, and they want Nanaimo broom-free. This woman here was the first broom buster in Nanaimo, and she has pretty single-handedly cleared all the broom, gathered groups in the, what's the name of the park? But anyway, the Jingle Pot, Westwood Lake, what is it? I think it's East, it's not, oh, and 3rd Street Park. Yeah, now she's moved on to 3rd Street. But anyway, she's cut about 50 hours this year, and she's been doing that just about every year since 2008. So when these volunteers are asking for something, we just want to make sure that they're not going to get discouraged. It's a real treasure, and when you want to go out looking for these volunteers, you can't make them happen. They show up, and if they show up, you just want to treat them like gold. So again, what they're asking for is that the city set aside a budget to pick up and chip up the broom and a bylaw to get absentee landowners, businesses, and property owners to take care of their own property. Often volunteers are willing to help private landowners if a person is in need, but it doesn't make sense for volunteers to cut broom on Home Depot property. And that's what happened in 2012 when local elderly neighbors complained about the broom pollen making them sick. If there was a bylaw, the broom would be removed from these backfields to everyone's benefit. There's other invasive plants to deal with, but broom can be eliminated without stealing resources from dealing with other invasive plants because of these volunteers. These were volunteers from VIU. They've been cutting broom for about 3 years. These are other areas cleared by volunteers, Woodgrove Mall Road, Northfield Visitors Center, the Nanaimo Parkway, obviously we're not done. The woman on the left, she's cut broom for about 50 hours as well this year. Broom is not that hard to get rid of. You don't have to remove the roots. You just need to cut the broom in bloom. So we're trying to change the awareness of all the people on Vancouver Island, and we can do this. Here's Ald's Road. People just, broom disappears, and they go like, well, was there ever broom there? Nobody knows. But then it's just gone, and no questions asked. We did a lot of cutting around the Nanaimo sign this year, so that's a change. So the Broom Busters are finished cutting broom in Nanaimo for 2012, but we'll be back at work next May when broom is in bloom again to do another 400 hours or more again. And we just want to make sure that Nanaimo is there with us. So thank you.
Well, great. Well, I just want to say, Ms. Sales, on behalf of council, what a wonderful job you and the volunteers are doing. And I recall the last time you were here, you had some equally large numbers of people that had been out there volunteering their time at no cost. And I sincerely hope that somebody on this council today will make a motion to support what you've asked for, because it's very, very reasonable. We could never do it ourselves with the amount of time, 400 hours in some cases, which is amazing. So
yeah, 400
thank you
hours.
again for the work that you do. And I think there will be people that, I think hopefully all the people at home realize that helping you, is there a way to contact you, or how, if people at home wanted to volunteer to cut next spring when it starts?
Broombusters.org. Just go to the website and we'll connect you with the local people. Now there's so many volunteers that we have North Nanaimo, contact, and South Nanaimo contact, and there's also Cedar and Lanceville, so there's plenty of
Isn't that great?
Connections.
Well, thanks again. We have a question here, Councillor Beswick.
Thank you, Worship. Highest of commendment to you and your volunteers. Is there piles of broom out there now that need picked up now?
Yes, yeah. I don't think that there's... The problem is we just feel stress when we ask the Parks Department because they're already stretched, and or Public Works, and just because the other cities kind of like plan ahead and they know that there is a budget for removing the broom, we would just rather not have to stress out overworked Public Works people.
Thank you.
Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Sales, for all your wonderful work in our community. I know that your hours of, we can't express enough gratitude, so thank you for that. And I would like to make a motion to that effect, and I think that's a part of the plan that we have being brought forward tonight, as a matter of fact. So the plan is inclusive. The invasive plant is part of the plan, isn't it, Mr. Harding? Yeah, so it'll be taken care of when we pass the motion tonight.
Okay, thank you.
And you're making the motion?
I will. That Council adopt the City of Nanaimo's invasive plant management strategy as a guide to manage invasive plants in city-owned parks, natural areas, and lands.
Seconder for that? Is there a seconder for that? Thank you very much. There are some other members of the parks I thought would just jump at that. But anyway, let's question on the motion. All those in favor? Oh, sorry. Are you on the speaker here? Oh, you are too. Below that. Sorry, Councillor McKay.
Yes. I couldn't see anywhere in the report concerning the strategy as to the funding mechanism. There's a new staff member involved?
No, there's no new staff member. This year, Council adopted $20,000 towards in the actual strategy. So there's $20,000 this year in the budget of working towards some of the initiatives, as I mentioned in the Broom Busters. Our environmental planner, though, Rob Lawrence, has a presentation. Would answer some more of those questions. We haven't had a chance to do that yet. So if we did the presentation, it would show a little bit of the strategies and some of the
Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself, obviously. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? On the motion itself, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much for your effort.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Your Worship, may I just ask a question of staff
Oh,
as it relates
yeah.
to the motion that we just passed?
To staff?
And,
Richard?
and that is how within the invasive plan, strategy plan, do we address, or where in it do we address the requests from the delegation?
There is a recommendation in the strategy, the draft, where we are looking at a review of the property maintenance bylaw to look for some opportunities to be more specific on the priority invasive species and how enforcement is dealt with for invasive plants on private land.
Your Worship, if Councillor Bestwick's talking about how would we address the delegation's concern about budgeting to pick up the issues, then that would be something you should ask for a report on.
Thank you. Ask what? I'm sorry?
Ask for a report.
Report.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I understand the bylaw component, which is contained in the report, but I was just wondering about how we support the delegation. So I would just like to make a motion, Your Worship, that we refer the delegation's requests back to staff.
We've got a motion on the floor now.
We just passed it.
No, Your Worship, you made the motion and the motion passed, which is what is read on the agenda as it is right now.
This will be a separate motion entirely, then not separate from...
If that's what Councillor Bestwick wishes, that would be the case,
Okay, go
yes.
ahead, sure.
So we just refer back to staff a request on how to support the delegation's requirements for assistance in May of 2015 and beyond. Just to bring back a report on how to support her request.
Thank you.
Your Worship, I apologize. I forgot that she had mentioned 2015. You could just make a motion to refer the whole issue to the budget process if you like, and we just put it right on the budget process.
I'm happy. I think staff understand what the request for the motion is, and I hope that my balance of council understands too. To come back, how we're going to be able to support in the financial implications, and which department might pick up the stuff, Public Works or Parks or whomever. In the report, it will be contained in the report, and it'll come back to us to vote on it and its implications.
That was the motion from Councillor Bestwick. Was there a seconder on that? You've got a seconder?
There's no seconder yet.
I don't have a seconder yet, no.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on this one? Councillor Johnson, you want to discuss this?
Just bullet number 3 on page 68. I'm wondering if that covers it. Provide dedicated funding for invasive plant management to cover equipment costs, staff time, and contracted support needs. Would that cover that off, or do we require an additional report?
Right. Your Worship, it does, again, if we could just show the quick presentation that the environmental planner has, it shows some of the initiatives that are underway, and also show where we do help with groups like the Broom Busters already in picking up where we can. It's always expanding, and as the group expands, that's the concern is different areas like private lands or the highway right-of-ways. We don't always get there to pick up their broom, but if it's in a city park, currently right now, if they're doing it in city parks, we'll get there and make sure it's picked up. But it's how we expand the program. And Mr. Lawrence could explain a little bit more about the strategy.
Sure, and this will be brief, but it's an overview of the strategy and the recommendations and a bit of the background about the intent.
Your Worship, I think you're right in the middle of a motion, so we'll wait until you're done with the motion.
So, Your Worship, I'm quite comfortable to withdraw the motion if staff who know more about this than certainly I do, if this request is covered inside the strategy.
I believe it
and
is.
If it is not, then we'll determine that and come back with a motion that will allow us to move forward with the request.
Okay. Mr. Swaby, do you want to confirm that it's done? It will be done by staff?
Sorry, Your Worship. I think council, if they believe this is important, should make the motion now, whether it's covered in the report or not. If you would like this covered by way of report.
It's covered in the report and it's redundant, then?
Then I won't withdraw my motion, and I'd like to make the motion so it's clear that we support the request of the delegation as presented. And you will bring that back in the form of a report.
Second motion, Your Worship.
Is that significantly different from what you said, Mr. Swaby? But okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now we go into the water conservation
presentation, Your Worship.
Oh, I'm sorry too. That
this will be brief.
Okay.
I brought it in. I'm sorry.
Sorry. No, that.
Yeah,
When Mr. Sims rushed in here, I sort of thought that didn't realize we were still on with it. Sorry, go ahead.
This will be brief, and it's just a bit of a backgrounder on the strategy, the recommendations, and the logic behind it. So, as Joanne Sales had suggested, that invasive species are an issue in many landscapes across British Columbia, across North America, and some of them are of specific concern in public spaces because of their toxicity and because of some of the harmful impacts they have to infrastructure and to residential areas through their root system, for example. So, but they are very successful at what they do, and they don't have any natural predators or things to keep them in check. So that's why we need to make the extra effort to target specific species that are of a specific concern to our communities. The official community plan and the parks master plan both provide direction to protect and enhance our natural areas, and we have over 70% of our parks as natural spaces currently. So there's an increased, but there's also an increased level of attention, as we all know, about how we manage our natural spaces and areas, and that's why a strategy like this is needed. And there's many unique landscapes and ecosystem types we have in our park systems, and we're all well aware of this. Garry Oak woodlands, older coastal Douglas fir forests, our coastal bluff ecosystems, and these open spaces known as terrestrial herbaceous sites, which actually contain a number of nationally significant species, which are many of them registered on the Species at Risk Act, including our city flower, Lotus pinnatus, but many others, which are under threat, potential threat from a number of these invasive plants over time. So having the strategy can help identify priority sites, set priorities for education and public awareness, and help identify and monitor and track progress through the direction of the strategy itself. And it also clarifies how the city delivers its services in a strategic and cost-effective manner. So just giving a quick overview of the recommendations in the report, probably the most fundamental is the approach of using an early detection rapid response approach. Many other communities are following this, and this graph simply illustrates any particular invasive plant. There's a series of stages when it's first introduced in a community or a park or any landscape where there's an opportunity to eradicate it if detection is reached early enough. So it can be cost effective, it can be timely if key staff or members of the public are aware that there's a particular plant that is newly established in a community. Over time, when these plants become more established, the cost and the time needed to control them obviously go up. So choices have to be made depending on the site of the park, which invasive plants should be a priority. And that really depends where you are in the city. So providing community leadership is another key recommendation, and there's things we can do to raise public awareness, work with our universities and students to develop restoration trials and research. Over time, work with our regional partners and organizations like the Coastal Invasive Species Committee to coordinate how we manage invasive plants on a regional level, and use provincial inventory standards to map and identify these sites where there's some concerns. As well, clearly increasing public education and awareness by our website that we currently have on invasive plants, but also through public awareness campaigns and other opportunities with community groups, neighborhood associations to raise awareness about the program, but also the priority invasive plants that we'd want to be targeting. And finally, and again, this is supporting one of Joanne's requests, working with volunteers to contain more established invasive plants over time and allow them to have some level of service to provide the support they need for going after invasives that may not necessarily be parks priority, but have a community priority through the work of the volunteer organization. This particular site, as an example, is Jack Point. There was a fairly high infestation of English ivy, but with the work of a student crew, it was removed address fairly quickly. And a lot of that area has been rebounded with a lot of native species, and the biodiversity's come back quite spectacularly. So it's a good study of what can be possible if you target these areas effectively and early enough. And that's my overview.
Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Lawrence. Any questions for Mr. Lawrence? Okay. Thank you, sir. Very interesting. Now we can go into after the motion.
I'm sorry, the motion has been made already and passed, so you're up to 9B.
9B, Water Conservation Strategy. So, Mr. Sims, Swims is right. Sorry, Mr. Sims. Blah, blah. Anyway, the purpose obviously is to update the city's 2008 water conservation strategy to target a 10% reduction in consumption per decade as outlined in the Council's 2012-2015 strategic plan. Mr. Bill Sims, the Manager, Water Resources. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Council, for the opportunity to be here in front of you this evening. So just a brief overview of the updated water conservation strategy that we've been working on for the last little while. So as Council is well aware, in 2008 we had a water conservation strategy developed to support the water supply strategic plan. Then Council's corporate strategic plan, which has been referenced a couple of times here this evening, also created water as one of its 6 key strategies or key priority areas, and with the very specific objective, as was mentioned, achieving a 10% reduction in consumption per decade. So just to back up a little bit, so I'm not going to read the list, but on the demand side of things, in other words, on the customer side of the equation in water consumption, there's a number of things that the city's done over many decades to encourage a conservation mindset within its customer base. The top 3, as you can see, have been in place for 20 and 30 years. These are now considered best practices in the industry, especially the one full cost pricing. So this is where the cost of user rates paid by the users, the consumers of water, covers the entire cost of capital and operating of the system. So this is now considered a brand new best practice, but in Nanaimo, thanks to Council's initiative 20 years ago, and that's really had an impact on putting Nanaimo in the forefront of water conservation. So, and there's a bunch of others, most notably the low-flow toilet rebate program that Council implemented 5 years ago. Hard to believe. It's over 500 million litres of water that's been saved in the interim. The other side of conservation is on the supply side. So the stuff that isn't often seen, but it's the management of the resource as we deliver it to the customers. And so, of course, we're very careful and conscientious about how we balance sharing the water resource between the needs of drinking and the needs of the environment, which is the Nanaimo River. So carefully managing Jump Creek and its climate in the watershed to ensure that balance. One of the things that we've done, Council's well aware of the Regional District of Nanaimo and Team WaterSmart, and this is a partnership that we've been involved with for a good number of years. And I can't say enough about Team WaterSmart, their enthusiasm and their leadership in water conservation, public events everywhere, and we're pleased to be with them. More recently, on the educational side of things, we're starting to take school kids into the watershed so they can appreciate. This is a formal grade 5 initiative that they can appreciate what's going on. So back to the actual conservation strategy update. Most water conservation strategy initiatives are not new. So we've kind of gone back and looked at all of our data. We've kind of developed a menu of potential strategies. But more importantly, in this case, we had 2 community workshops. And we were in, the first workshop, we invited sort of industry leaders, members of VIU, and interested parties to come and just sort of work us through what makes sense as far as conservation strategies were concerned. And then we went back out to the community again, and this time we pulled in environmental groups from Woodlands and Wellington School, the School District 68, the hospital, large commercial developments, and it was a pretty positive and engaging exercise. And the minutes are in the tail end of the strategy document. So just a bit of inventory. The interesting phenomena that's been happening across the country, but also here in Nanaimo to a pretty strong degree, is a decline in per capita consumption. So it's really been only apparent in the last 3 or 4 years, but the trend has been ongoing since the middle of the 2000s, say 2004, 2005. So we've seen almost a 20% drop, that's the red line, in our annual average consumption. So we've gone from 600 liters per person down to about 500 or slightly less. That's pretty spectacular. The other one that's interesting to note is the yellow bars. We see a decline in that, and that's essentially the wintertime consumption. So that's indoor water use. So that's dropping as well as fixtures are replaced and technology improves, as well as people's awareness. So as mentioned, and this is a drum I like to bang once in a while, is that Nanaimo leads the country and leads the province in its water consumption. And we've often been sort of compared Nanaimo's total water delivered, that's the blue bars, compared to Canada's residential consumption, that's the red bars. So that's the unfair comparison, when in fact we're well ahead of the game. So total typically that's just the amount of water we deliver to the city divided by 365 divided by the population. So that includes every type of land use. It includes as well firefighting and flushing and leakage. So the conservation goals, the framework that we use to adopt the strategy, we're in the context of these. So protecting the water resource and recognizing it as a shared resource. The less water that we consume, the less water we have to pump, the less water we have to treat, and that helps keep overall costs down. The other thing that we're seeing with the significant decrease is that we can delay increasing capacity of infrastructure by, in some cases, years, which is pretty exciting. So that also plays into the overall economic picture. And of course, if we have the water available, that helps us allow for drought and emergency preparedness. So as mentioned, 10% reduction in per capita use per decade. That's an ambitious target. That was raised a number of eyebrows when that came through. But that's what it needs to be. It needs to be ambitious. It needs to be strong. So we picked a 20-year horizon, this 2035 so that takes us from where we are today, about 500 liters per person, down to about 400 liters per person. That's the average. So that's a significant drop in 20 years. How do we get there? So a number of these were identified in these community groups. A number of them were identified during the corporate strategic planning sessions around water. So the toilet rebate program, that's seeking to expand that so that we can have more than, or we can provide rebates for more than 2 toilets per property. So that would feed into multifamily apartment buildings, perhaps. Then there's always the ongoing education about grey water, improved irrigation techniques, smart technologies, all those wonderful things. And there's been ongoing partnerships, especially, for example, VIU, where we work with them on large volume, or some of their initiatives if we can help them out. And then, as Council's well aware, a couple of years ago, we completed the water audit, where we sort of took a good hard look at all of our numbers, and there was a number of recommendations on that, most notably to recover some of the revenue by replacing meters on a more frequent basis. So that's a recommendation in the conservation strategy as well. So this list on this slide is actually taken in, it's a shared list with the Regional District of Nanaimo. So we worked on these water conservation strategies in parallel and with quite a bit of collaboration. So a lot of these things are similar, and we would work together to implement them, so it's a regional-wide approach. The last one, aligned watering restrictions, that just helps to eliminate some of the confusion that, if you live outside the city, then this is your water restriction. If you're inside, then it's this. That has implications in bylaws, so we're discussing that as we go. So we would ask that council adopt the strategy, and next steps from here would be that we'd work away at a number of the recommendations which are listed here. The water supply forecasting model, that's a predictive tool that allows us to manage the water predictively in the watershed, the water supply. And that's essentially I'd be happy to take questions. The last slide shows a slide that the Regional District of Nanaimo developed for a watershed-friendly yard competition, where they said, submit some photos and how your yard is watershed-friendly, and it was just kind of a neat little thing to raise awareness. That's it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sims. I have a question. There'll be some others as well, I'm sure. Am I mistaken? I seem to recall that by 2024, the demand for water will exceed supply. Is that still a figure? And I guess, given that as a benchmark, then when we're showing a reduction of, almost 20% now, from 500 to 400, does that push the date back further, or does it have any implication on that 2024 date?
Absolutely, it does. The challenge that we have, of course, is we've set a target. If we achieve that target, that helps delay the need where our water supply capacity is reached. The counterbalancing effect is climate change. So that we're starting to see where we have a longer, drier, warmer period and a shorter wet period. So that may lead to less ability to retain the water in the first place, but increased length of time where water is used for irrigation for local crops, for example. So, but the short answer is yes, it has the potential to delay if we hit those targets.
Yes.
So the thinking is to plan for the increase in supply by, with the target date of 2024. As the city gets closer to that date, we reassess, where are we today? Can we delay it a few more years? So with the goal of delaying a large expenditure, of course.
Great, thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. Sims. A couple of questions. I have to think that the Merle-Logan Fields are helping our water consumption.
I'm sorry,
the Merle-Logan Fields, I'm sure, are helping our water consumption. Okay, we don't have to water the fields, sorry. Soccer fields, the artificial turf.
Artificial.
I would like to see us do that in more places, but you mentioned in your report expanding the rainwater harvesting incentives. Could you please tell me what the current, or could you help me what the current rainwater harvesting incentives are? So what we would expand?
Yeah, that's excellent. The Regional District of Nanaimo offers a region-wide rebate of $750 if you install a rainwater harvesting system or a glorified rain barrel that's larger than 1,000 gallons. So it's a very large tank, and it can be expensive, but it's also 1,000 gallons of recuperated rainwater can go an awful long way to irrigating a lawn or a garden. So the regional district has this. It was taken up very quickly by Gabriola last year. There was only one person in Nanaimo. Lack of awareness. So this is the intent here, is to help raise the awareness within Nanaimo.
So Protection Island and other places that, and the city of Nanaimo, obviously. We're promoting. We're going to be ambitious in promoting maybe smaller than 1,000.
That's the threshold for the rebate at this point.
For the regional district.
Within the regional district, yes.
So, and are we calling ourselves within the regional district, but we've only had one person from the municipality of the city of Nanaimo take advantage of it? Is that what I understood?
In the past, it hasn't been. It's a fairly new program within the regional district, or within the Team Water Smart umbrella, I guess.
Okay, thank you. And then leak detection. Do we know do we have an estimate what we think our leak volume is today, and how we know how we're getting better at our leak detection?
So the current level of leakage is extremely low relative to the infrastructure that we have.
We fixed the leak at Bevan Park?
I'm sorry?
We fixed the leak at Bevan Park Pool?
Correct. There's a number, we become aware of them when they're acute. The current rate of leakage is about 10%. The intent in the water conservation strategy is twofold, to help our some of the meters that we use to deliver the water, just to maybe augment a few of those so that we can see where the water's going and monitor where there may be leakage. And in the case that we become aware of a leakage, is to plant listening devices in grid patterns and in certain areas to listen for these leaks. There's some technology that's able to do that.
Thanks.
Councillor Skip.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of this is based on our water audit, and I've had some concerns with the water audit over time. How do we validate our leakage now? Or how do you get to the 10%?
It goes in the process of using the American Water Works guides for developing water audits, which is M36, I believe, and it's compared to the meters are calibrated. The bulk water meters that we use to deliver water are calibrated. Those numbers are compared to what we charge or what we bill out for water. And then we use our SCADA system to determine, if there may have been a fire and to try and determine what the volume of the fire may be, as an example. Or the same with our flushing program. Use our SCADA system to determine what the volumes would be. So in that way, you get down to the actual losses, which is the leakage.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And that's a concern for me. When we say our usage is 500 liters or 400 liters, what goes through my house is nowhere near that, but I pay for, say, you turning on the tap to get cold water, or the fires. It says we have 6 to 10 fires a year in our city in the water audit, but our fire department says we have 40. So is it just that the 6 to 10 fires a year use over a certain volume of water, or how do you say in this audit that there's only 6 to 10 fires a year?
I'm not familiar with where that number came from, but I suspect it's from
222. The 222 is the figure number that it comes out of on the audit.
Thanks. So I believe that may be from, and it may be a little speculative, that this is where water is used from the reservoirs that we can measure, and that would be measurable water that is used to fight the fire, as opposed to firefighting with foam or other means of suppression.
Okay, and then, like I say, I've had looked this over, and we don't identify a lot. We've like 14,000 of our meters, and we haven't identified, out of 26,000 we have identified. And then I see in here like the mention of this SR21 meter, residential meter. There's no such thing. It's an SR or an SR21s. And throughout this, this is done by professionals, and we don't have a thing as an SR21 meter anywhere. And so I'm confused all the time when I see little mistakes throughout a document and little things. It confuses me because we're basing our replacement of meters, and especially our big meters, on this. And we're talking about downsizing meters in this. And I know I have concerns with our purchasing and what meters we are purchasing and how they go through our process. So can you explain to me why we mention these different meters? Like, I'm concerned with the accuracy of our water audit that we're basing this on. So how do I justify that it says SR21s? And I've asked staff if they actually look at the meters and identify them, and they say no, they don't do that because it's not been a priority. So when a guy's reading a meter, wouldn't we identify it at that place, identify it, click it into the thing and say it's a certain type of meter, or do we do that?
So some of the meters that we have in the system are identified as to what they are. And it sounds like that might be a typo. Like I believe the SR2 is commonly referred to as one of the more common meters that we have.
The SR with two
ones, yes. So twos, and so I suspect that that's a typo.
So, but it's SR2, SR11, SR21, S21. Isn't it a consistent naming? It shows me errors in the plan, and especially when it says 6 to 10 fires a year in Nanaimo. That's confusing to me. I think there's way more. And so I don't know. I'm concerned with the accuracy of our report. That's all I can say.
Okay, Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. Sims, for your presentation. Do you have, are you able at this point, with any accuracy, to be able to say, for $1 spent on conservation, it preserves X number of dollars in new capital or new requirements? Are we able to quantify that yet?
That's an excellent question, but I would say not immediately. The one example was a question that came up this morning, I believe, is on the meter replacement. So there's 20 meters that that are due for replacement that might be oversized, that we might not be reading as accurately as we could. So there's 3 years at $30,000 a year towards replacing some of those meters. The revenue recouped would be about $95,000. So there's a sort of a direct one-to-one pay, and then after that it helps. But to go specifically to your question, is if we invest, as the report suggests, $475,000 towards conservation, intuitively that's going to pay dividends, but I don't have an exact number.
Thank you. Supplemental, Your Worship. I guess what I was looking for was, if we spend $1 to assist somebody to replace a high volume toilet, or $75, let's say, what does that return back in savings in new capital? Because we were told that we could expect a dam project, whichever form it might take, at upwards of $150 million. So I'm looking at it saying, well, how many, what value is it? We all know the value of conservation, but if we invest $75 in a new toilet, what are we saving at the other end? And what are we postponing, if you will?
Yeah, and I think there's so many variables that get thrown in there. But if it delays a year, then that allows another year of collecting of DCCs, for example. If it delays 10 years, then that's another 10 years of deferral and decreased net present value. So there's a lot of variables, and we haven't gone to that level.
I guess the next one is the comparison between multifamily and commercial. I've always believed that people spend a lot of time at work, and there's no incentive program, and we haven't seemed to have gotten into an incentive program to deal with those, those toilets, for example, that are used by scores of people during the course of a given day. And what would would you suggest that might be more beneficial than going into multifamily, or is it multifamily that's more beneficial?
Well, the interesting
what resources
that certainly came up as part of the community workshops, and that exact question was raised, and the general response in the room was, no, it should go towards the residential end of things, because businesses are constantly updating anyhow. So there's a constant renovation. So that's going to introduce a natural stream or a natural turnover of low-flow toilets into a business, into a commercial enterprise for the most part. Whereas multifamilies, older apartment buildings may not. That was the discussion.
Right. So that's the general feeling of the community. But you can't say that if I replace that toilet at that business establishment, I'm going to get a way bigger bang for the buck than replacing that one at that apartment unit.
Yeah, and I think this is open. I think this is open. The recommendation is to expand it so that there's more than 2 per property.
Yeah.
And if council desires to include corporations or companies or the Vancouver Island Conference Centre, which already has low-flow toilets, then that's your prerogative, of course.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Why do the Dutch have such low consumption rates?
Why do
the Dutch people have such low consumption?
They don't have to irrigate because they're underwater.
No, I think other than only taking a bath on Saturdays.
I think that no, it's not. Well, there may be something there, but no, I think that the Northern European ethic is a little different, right? There's definitely conservation minded. That's deeply ingrained, and there's not as much irrigation needed as, say, in Northern Europe as there is here in Canada. North America has a more consumerist mentality, let's say.
Okay. Were you aware of some of the questions that Mr. Boland sent us?
Yes.
Okay. And have they all been answered?
We can answer them by email, absolutely.
All right. Well, his first remark was about 3 times 50 not being $250,000 in the first line of your graph.
That was a typo.
That was that one. Do we not have a watershed forecasting model already?
No, so essentially what we do now is we take lots of inputs and we go on our experience. The idea of a watershed forecasting model would be to create this a little bit more scientifically and to have a bunch of inputs and needs, and then to be able to predict with confidence. Okay, if we didn't get rain between now and the end of September, what does that look like? We think it's important as we get closer and closer to our capacity to be able to be managing it that much tighter. So that's the intent of the watershed forecast model.
Leak detection you've been dealing with. What will be involved in an audit update which is not reflected in current operating data? So what's going to be added? What's new?
So essentially, it's going through the effort again. But it's an update. I'm trying to remember. I think our total value that we spent was somewhere in $60,000 to do the last audit update. So every few years, it's appropriate to go through and look at our data again, look at all of the billing information, collate it, and do a check-in. And so we would bring somebody in from outside with expertise.
Did we talk about oversized water meters?
So it's about right-sizing the meters. So there's this balance of, some of these are fire flow meters. We've got to be careful not to constrict fire flow to a property, of course. So it's about finding the right size. Currently, meters are sized based on the plumbing code. It counts the number of fixtures in a building, and that gives you a number. It should be based on the flow, so that the meter measures it accurately with this balance of not restricting fire flow.
Thank you. Maybe I might just point out, Mr. Sims, that one of the things that happens, I think, in Holland as well, while they're very conservative with their water, they're also very efficient in recycling. So it must be something in the Dutch that make them very frugal that way. But nonetheless, but thank you very much, Mr. Sims. I know you put a lot of work into this report, and I appreciate your time on that. There's a motion here, staff recommendation motion that Council adopt the 2014 Water Conservation Strategy. Moved and seconded. Discussion. Councillor Brennan. No. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Sims. We're going into bylaw notice enforcement amendment bylaw 2014 number 7159.01. Purpose to amend the bylaw notice enforcement bylaw 2012 to establish a joint registry with other local governments. Staff recommendation that council receive the report pertaining to the bylaw notice information amendment bylaw.
Who's staff's recommendation?
Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into the bylaws itself. If somebody would like to move, there's 3 of them.
That bylaw notice enforcement amendment bylaw 2014 number 7159.01 to amend bylaw 7159 to include the cities of Duncan and Parksville in the district of Tofino in the bylaw adjudication system registry established at 411 Dunsmore Street, passed first reading.
Second motion. Discussion. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question to staff. Do the inclusion of these other districts and cities reduce our exposure?
Your Worship, it adds to the cost and helps contribute, but Mr. Seward is here, sorry, so I'll turn it over to him.
To Councillor Bestwick, there's no additional cost for the city in this. We pay for adjudicator to come, and the percentage of cost for that each municipality is paid for by that municipality.
Councillor McKay.
Thank you. This looks like a partnering agreement, not unlike the 911. Can you tell me if there is a memorandum of understanding with QP concerning any employees attached to this program, that should the partnering agreement dissolve, that that they clearly know what the results will be?
Your Worship, we're not aware of any labor relations issues related to this. Maybe, Councillor, if you are, we could understand that better.
Well, no. In the report, it says that there's a clerk involved in this program. So if we are the sponsoring municipality and we're hiring an employee, and should this partnering agreement with all these other municipalities dissolve at some point in the future, what responsibility do we have to the employees that are our employees? The dissolution may or may not be by our own doing.
Just like to confirm the clerk involved has a very minor part of the process. Is just lining up the each file for adjudication. That is the current employee who is doing that as part of their current duties. If we discontinue this in some manner in the future, then that employee would, her roles would not change that much. She would just continue to do the job she currently is in the bylaw enforcement section.
So it's essentially just somebody doing a very small portion of their job to
correct. The main portion that is taking place is the adjudicator who is hired, and they're the ones that have the most involvement, and of course that's on a contract basis.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And
Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment, Bylaw 2014 number 7159.01, pass second reading.
Second, see no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And finally,
That Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment, Bylaw 2014 number 7159.01, pass third reading.
second, no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Property Maintenance Bylaw 1990 number 3704. It's requested that Council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to property maintenance for the properties listed below. The motion is that Council, pursuant to Property Maintenance Bylaw 1990 number 3704, direct the owners of 910 Beaufort Drive to remove discarded Mud King tire, good sized tire, 2 couches, construction waste, cardboard boxes containing household items, garbage bags, and miscellaneous debris from the premises within 14 days, or the work will be done by the City of Nanaimo or its agents at the owner's cost. Is there anyone in attendance tonight that would like to speak to matters related to 910 Beaufort Drive? Seeing none, if somebody would like to move. Staff recommendation. Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Allocation of liquor retail store rezoning community contributions to the Unitarian Extreme Weather Shelter for the 2014-2015 winter season. Purpose to allow the extreme weather shelter to operate throughout the winter 2014-2015 by funding cold, wet weather nights that do not meet the criteria for extreme weather night, which are funded by BC Housing. Staff recommendation is you moved and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Bylaws with no accompanying report. Motion that highway closure and dedication removal, a portion of Westwood Road adjacent to 178 and 182 Westwood Road, Bylaw 2014 number 7136 be adopted. Moved. Seconder. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And B, that highway closure and dedication removal portion of Armand's Place, adjacent to 6200 Dumont Road, Bylaw 2014 number 7190, be adopted. Moved, seconded, discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And finally, a motion that Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw 2014 number 7197.01 to amend Schedule A of the 2014-2018 Financial Plan to include current estimates for the purchase of parkland in Lindley Valley be adopted. Moved. Seconder. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Correspondence not related to a report to Council. There's a letter dated 2014 May 19 from Mr. Kelly Mann, President and CEO, on behalf of the BC Summer Games Board, thanking Council for continued support.
Move receipt of correspondence.
Second, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Council appointments, there is no notice of motion from anyone? Sorry? Okay, that's, for the future one, you go on. And now other business, 14A, Councillor Brennan, BC Shipbuilding Industry. Councillor Brennan?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move that the Mayor write to the BC Premier and her caucus to request that her government confirm their commitment to the BC shipbuilding industry by ensuring that all BC ferries, ship construction and repair, as well as other BC government-owned vessels, be performed in BC shipyards.
Is there a seconder? Second.
I will speak to it.
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm making this motion. We did receive some correspondence about it from the BC Federation of Labour and from the President of the Shipyard General Workers Federation of BC. They tell us, and I think this is absolutely true, that the economic benefits of local ship procurement brings significant social and economic benefits of building new ships in BC. There's a series of, they've listed a series of the impacts, direct and indirect, and they are massive. The renewal of skilled shipbuilding and repair labor force is also integral to BC's new industrial strategy. And the province has accepted this for the LNG working group. They have made it part of their industrial strategy. They have recommended that 25% of the overall workforce for the LNG strategy be apprentices. And so we would be looking for the federal government, or the federal government has made a commitment to the BC shipbuilding industry, and we would be looking for the province to do the same and have similar strategies around apprentices.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, the president of C-SPAN is on the apprenticeship board, and one of the challenges that they have is not so much getting work, but it is getting people. The other thing is that whole industry is an industry in flux right now. The last boat that Vancouver Shipyards built, they bid $45 million on it, and it cost $75 million to build. They lost $30 million on that project. And one of the reasons they did was because, in their own words, we have lost our experienced people. We don't know how to do this. We need to rebuild this industry. But forcing a government to purchase ships that will cost them significantly more than if they go elsewhere and go to open competitive bidding is not the way to do it. An example, 1992, the Spirits of British Columbia and Vancouver Island were being built. They cost $185 million a copy. Fast forward to 2007, to the Coastal Inspiration, the Renaissance, and their sister ship. Those ships were at $98 million. 14 years later. So I find it confusing that this council would endorse something like this when we purchase 8,000 tons of sand from a company in Victoria so we can save $576 on a $180,000 purchase. Yet we want to send a strong message to our provincial government. It doesn't matter what the cost is. We want them built in BC. We want them built in the most efficient manner possible. We don't need to go any further to find out where C-SPAN intends to build their ferries. They intend to build 5 dual-fueled ferries to replace their aging fleet that operates from the river, from Tilbury to Nanaimo. They haven't got the capacity to build those here. They're going elsewhere. They've built 4 large 100-plus foot tractor tugs. One of them was built in Redmond, Washington, about 4 years ago. The other 3 were built in Turkey. They don't have the capacity or the expertise to build them here. And the list goes on and on and on. So to force the provincial government or to mandate the provincial government builds at no matter what cost, it just seems senseless to me. I can't support this.
Okay, Councillor Patchy. Well, Councillor Brennan, did you have something to add too?
I can speak after Councillor Paggi. I do want to speak.
Okay,
again.
Councillor Patchy, go ahead.
Well, I was born on a shipyard. I spent the first 19 years of my life on a shipyard. My family was in the shipbuilding business for, 217 years in the Netherlands. And I can tell you that subsidizing it to the extent where it becomes so expensive doesn't work. You know, there's some very sad examples that come with it. I realized that when there was no successor to my father, for instance, when I had left for Canada, and eventually became necessary to sell it. It was sold to someone who was our hot competition, who bought the shipyard, and before we knew it, he was building sections on what used to be our shipyard and then transported to his own to build ships and to construct them. It didn't take him very long to figure out that it was cheaper to do it in the Ukraine, in Poland, in Romania, and a few other places, and so that all came to a grinding halt. I agree with Councillor McKay that while it obviously would be wonderful to have all these ships that may or may not be required in the future built in BC, I think before I could vote for this, I wanted to have some sort of inkling as to what the limit would be as far as the savings are concerned. If a ferry, as Councillor McKay pointed out, was $96 million a few years ago, if we build it in BC now, it would be 124, and if it could be built in Korea, say, or China for 64, then I know where we should be going. So I'd like to have some sort of comparison as to where the limit is to what this involves, if they're all built in BC without further ado. So at this point, I won't be able to support.
Okay, I just want to verify with staff, this has been moved and seconded at this point. So any further discussion from, Councillor Brennan, I'm sorry, you did have.
So what we are told by the Columbia Institute, their modeling study, made in BC Ferries, the economic benefits of local ship procurement. The economic modeling shows that there are significant social and economic benefits, and I'll list the ones that they enumerate here. A cumulative interest in provincial real gross domestic product of $378 million in 2013 dollars, a $200 million increase in consumer expenditure, an average annual increase in employment of 1,063 workers over 3 years, an increase in government tax revenue of $66 million at the federal level and $36 million at the provincial level, and for every 100 jobs created in the BC shipyard and repair industry, an additional 135 jobs are created in the province, and I might add none if you build them in Korea. And I think the point of this is to introduce the notion to the provincial government of reactivating our shipbuilding. You know, the kinds of things that Councillor McKay has told us just indicate that we have lost a lot of traction in this area, and we need, I believe, to tell the provincial government that we want them to reintroduce shipbuilding here. I don't know how many billions it was that the feds have put into shipbuilding. So I think that's what this motion intends to do, is to reintroduce skilled shipbuilding back into BC. We're a maritime province.
Okay, I see no further speakers on this. The motion is before you. All those in favor? Opposed? We have Councillor Beswick, Mayor Rattan, Councillor Patchy, and Councillor McKay opposed. And so it's going to be, Councillor, you voted in favor. So it's defeated on a tie vote. You agree with me on it? Okay. So we now...
I'm sorry, Your Worship, can you do the count again?
Okay, well,
Yeah.
we can...
Okay. It's a tie vote then.
Sorry?
It's defeated in a tie vote.
Defeated,
Yes,
that's what I said,
thank you.
yeah. Do you need to see the numbers again, or are you okay? Okay, so we move now into...
Before something of some other business that just came to my mind, I'd like the public to support the RCMP tomorrow if possible. There's a march from the police headquarters with responders regarding the recognition of the responders that died in Moncton. So I'd like the public to know that tomorrow there's a parade of responders from the police station down to St. Paul's at what time? 10:30? 10:30 in the morning, the service starts and that. So just to show our support in the community.
No, it's 1 o'clock, I have in mind.
Starts at 1. Oh, it starts at 1? Would the march be?
The service starts at 1.
So they'll probably march just before that, I'm sure. But around that time, if the public can show their respect and support for the RCMP, I think it would be very timely. So I just wanted
Excellent
to
point,
mention that.
Councillor Gibb. My notes show RCMP service for the slain officers will be St. Paul's Anglican Church, 100 Chapel Street, Tuesday at June 10th, and commencing from 1 to 2 p.m. And I think that's accurate. So, but thank you for bringing that up. That's an excellent point. Okay, I think that's it, and we'll move into question period.
If you don't mind, is that why our flags are at half-mast right now?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. In your transportation plan, is there going to be any strategy from council direction to your city manager as to car allowance payments and all that sort of thing, working towards the bicycle?
Well, I don't think that it's in the transportation plan per se, but I know that if Councillor Anderson was here, the
Well,
chair...
if we're promoting that, Mayor Rattan, leadership would be not to be
Excellent
paying
point.
out any large payments or anything for
And
car allowances.
I do know our city manager, Mr. Swaby, is a very avid bike rider, and so I'm sure he'll take that under advisory.
Thank you. And in question regarding Kenworth Road development at the end of the road, Mr. Lawrence that was here has some excellent statements on the City of Nanaimo website about protection of environmentally sensitive areas, etc. And we hear tonight man-made enhancement replacing some of this long-term growth that's part of the food chain, et cetera, to the fish and everything in Diver Lake. What evidence do we have that this all of a sudden man-made environment acts right away to replace what we remove?
Don't know if we can answer that one. I think...
Well, Your Worship, we certainly look for environmental assistance when we look at those sorts of things from biologists in the field, and they provide advice on how to proceed.
Yes, Mayor Rattan, I hear. I also believe that if consultants, etc., didn't take you in the avenue you wish, there may be other consultants looked upon. And in MOE referrals in the past, it's always talked about great with an oil separator. We have insisted Country Club parking lot have about $1 million oil separator because water goes to any drainage or roofs or anything goes to Diver Lake and some other locations. What's happening with this property, i.e. an oil separator or tall grass, etc., to try and reduce the pollution off any kind of tarmac roof or anything like that? I don't see anything in regards to trying to provide clean storm water into that lake.
Interesting point. I'm not sure that, is there a staff comment on whether or not that has?
Your Worship, I don't have those details. We may not be at that stage with the civil engineer, but that's something that we'll keep in mind for sure.
Well, it is been demanded in the past for approval of projects by MOE. I did question Ministry of Environment building on Labio, where's your oil separator? And he says, there's no provincial law demanding it, which I shook my head because they demand it when they answer back to the city. So there seems to be a mix-up in trying to protect our fish-bearing lakes, etc. And when I read a walkway, how wide is the walkway going to be that you want eventually around the lake?
The boardwalk part of it, John?
They're 3 meters in width. I would think that would be about
2 to 3 meters.
And that leaves possibly 2 meters left for protection to the sensitive area if you're only giving these people 5 meters. You're going to put a 3-meter walkway in, that leaves 6 feet protection. Would that be correct?
Maritan, actually, the walkway proposed in that area is a 2.5 meter walkway.
So only 2.5 left for protection to the sensitive area.
Okay, sir, thank you.
Robert Fuller, 3350 Hammond Bay Road. Mr. Kipp, I'm just going to give a brief opinion. When I elect an official to represent me, I elect him to represent my best interests first and foremost over anything else. So if that's any consolation, please hold your beliefs. Second, as a taxpayer and a citizen, I'm rather flabbergasted that with what is already in place in the community charter, I've had to pay again for a regurgitation of a new document, the government's review on roles, responsibilities, and relationships. What has been the cost of this section of the report? Could anyone tell me that? Just this section.
I'm not sure if we have a figure on it. Do we?
Chip, we certainly don't, but we could attempt to break it down for council if you'd like.
Okay.
Thank you. This question has to do with the water conservation strategy, and I think Mr. Patchy's already touched upon it. It's in the financial summary on page 73. Mr. Patchy noticed from Mr. Boland's question that the expansion of the toilet rebate program was 50-50-50 when it should have 2 other 50s in it. As well, in the total investment column, $475,000 is stated when $575,000 is the amount it should be if the figures are listed correctly. Is that just a typo as well, I would imagine?
Your Worship, we'll have to get back to Mr. Fuller tomorrow on that.
It'd just be really, really important if these numbers are correct in reports when either the public and or council are reading them, because it could end up in a vote taken that's totally going against what one subscribes to his own beliefs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Your point's taken. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
And there's a seconder. We stand adjourned. Thank you.